they're not going to find it either, right? We're not going to look for that. And if you look on, on any mainstream news, no one's really talking about this issue this way. It's just the war keeps going, the war keeps going, the war keeps going, right? And I get that. And Americans are getting tired of it.
Thank you so much for coming on today. I didn't expect to have you on, but anytime someone reaches out to me or, expresses, like, hey, Dylan, I kind of want to talk to you about this, even if it's in private, I always get eager because it's a conversation, I care about a lot. It's an issue I obviously care a lot about. And I think we can just get straight into it. Would it be okay if I read the message you sent me and we use it as a launching off point?
Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we'll read your message, and I don't want to mischaracterize your message, and so then you can explain what you meant by it. That sound good?
Yep. 100%.
Fantastic. Also, are you going to be at LibertyCon?
I will not be. No.
Ah, darn. Okay. Well.
Why? Should I be down there?
Well, I'm gonna be at LibertyCon. It's
Oh, I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can make it.
It's in February of next year in DC.
I will try to make it.
Yeah, it's a big libertarian convention. The people there.
Yeah, but I see libertarians all the time.
That's true.
So, yes.
That's true. You know what? You know what this feels a little bit like. Like anytime I know a lot of gay people are like out of nowhere, like if somebody meets a gay person after finding out I'm gay, they're gonna set me up with them no matter what. I feel like I just did the libertarian version of that to you. Like, libertarian event, so you must go to the libertarian event. Yes. Okay, let me read your message. Sadly, it looks like my prediction of Ukraine is coming true. We have given just enough to prolong the war so we can study the tactics for our own military training, and we've depleted our stores enough to validate massive increases for the military-industrial complex. We are sacrificing thousands of Ukrainians for it, and now the U.S. is starting to lose interest. We'll be setting up, quote, you put like in quotation marks, peace talks by the end of the year, and Ukraine will have gained nothing except for debt from a bunch of U.S. banks and contractors to clean up this mess. It is really a shame that our government continues to do this, and our populations keep squabbling over the L and R paradigm. When you say LR paradigm,
left right
paradigm. Okay, got you. I thought R meant Republican. I didn't know what L stood for. Okay, LR paradigm. I hope you stay safe. Okay, so you don't think that the aid to Ukraine has been successful? Would that be the shortest way of summarizing your position?
And I think it was on purpose, right? When you and I talked about a year ago, I remember it was about a year ago.
Yeah.
One of my biggest worries was that we would just be here a year later in a very similar position with a whole lot more dead Ukrainians, a whole lot more dead Russians. And all that's going to happen is Americans going to be able to increase the military-industrial complex. It validates the military-industrial complex, and we're going to write a whole bunch of new field manuals. And the price for writing these field manuals is the arms and legs of Ukrainian youth. And I have no trust in the American government to do what's the right thing. I think they will only use this to sacrifice other people so that we can grow our empire, and not empire meaning physical empire, meaning military-industrial complex empire. Because what also happened is the world watched Ukrainians destroy Russian tanks. Mm-hmm. So now all those people who were thinking about buying Russian tanks are rethinking. Wait a minute, should we be buying Russian tanks, German tanks, American tanks? So now we're even picking up new markets from this of people who used to be buying Russian tanks. We watched the Russian tanks get blown up. So even that's happening, and that's now sacrificing both Russians and Ukrainians. So the Germans are using this as a reason to bring and to explode their military-industrial complex, because they've been trying to build a military for decades, but their system is anti-military. I understand why. So they're against it. But now they can say, look, we've lost Leopard tanks. We have to be able to rebuild these things. And this is what Schultz is going to be using to now increase the German spend on building their military-industrial complex. And that's my biggest issue. I thought that was going to happen. And I feel like exactly that's happening. And I think a year from now, once we feel that we've gotten enough and we've sucked the Ukrainians and Russians dry, we're going to have peace talks in wherever, Saudi Arabia or Norway or whatever. I don't know where. We're going to find a spot someplace.
Oman, maybe.
We're going to have peace talks. Like yeah, Oman, whatever. And we're going to find a spot and we're going to set the lines almost the same as they are now. There may be a little bit of a wiggle room here or there to make somebody feel a little bit better. But the Russians are going to have a chunk of Ukraine. Ukraine's not going to have a full country. They're going to end it. And now in come U.S. banks to finance the repair of Ukraine. And they're going to finance the entire thing. And Ukraine's going to be in debt for the next 30 years to U.S. banks. That's always been my worry.
So first, there's a few things that I want to respond to.
I know I threw a lot out there. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's fine because I'm going to do the same thing in this conversation probably. The first thing, when it comes to the Germans, I think the Germans are an exceptionally special case because I don't know if you how much you know about the German military. I don't know a lot about the German military either. But everything from my conversation with German soldiers, my conversations with the German military staff, and from the research that I've done, the German military is in a sorry shape. With some basic deficiencies when it comes to ammunition, when it comes to supplies. So I think that the Germans investing in their own military and trying to hit the 2% threshold that most NATO states said that they would try to hit, I think that makes sense, especially in the fallout of what just happened with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and with European.
I agree. I'm not against it.
Okay, because it just sounded like you were against the Germans investing more. And as an American,
no. I wasn't against it. I was saying they are the problem is the German system. If you talk to these, but they'll tell you it's a systemic issue, right? Their system is very slow about growing. And again, that was done on purpose after World War II to slow the system down so they can't massively ramp up. Their entire system is everything is slow. Procurement's slow. Everything is slow. Schultz is trying to fix that. And he's using Ukraine. That's why he sent those Leopard tanks. That's why the Germans sent tanks. They sent that stuff there so they now have a trigger to now fix. I'm not against them doing it, but why you sacrifice Ukrainian lives? Just go to the Reichstag and fix it on your own. You don't got to sacrifice people's lives for this. Okay. Just get there and have a good argument and change your system.
So there's two main points I want to hit on. The first point is this idea of the reasons why the Germans did this was to enrich the military-industrial complex, empower the military-industrial complex.
I believe that.
This is a big problem that I have with libertarians, but also with like a lot of people when it comes to foreign policy. And that is, people want a really like easy like answer as to why a war or a conflict or an issue has occurred, right? People like to make it's marketable, being able to say, why did this war happen? Why did World War II happen? Because the Germans were angry. Or like you have some like one conclusion you can put down and say, that's why the war happened. And when it comes to weapons manufacturers, that's what I feel like this has become. It is, I believe it's a somewhat reductive analysis. In fact, I would call it extremely reductive analysis. What this would mean is that not only is it in the United States is doing this to enrich the military-industrial complex, but the Germans, the French, the Estonians, the Latvians, the Lithuanians, the Poles, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, I believe they're actually doing a few shipments. The Greeks, they have sent some infantry carriers.
That's not what I'm saying. No.
Wait, well, let me finish.
I said two specific countries, and I speak just those two.
So those two countries, that's their reason for doing it. But for everyone else, they all have different, more diverse reasons that maybe are more justifiable. Okay. Could it not be that all of these countries have many diverse reasons for being, and this is just one special interest group that has pushed America in supporting Ukraine? Because if you look at any war that's ever happened, the people who sell guns are going to love the war because they sell guns.
100%.
That's their job, is to sell guns.
100%.
But that would mean also that anytime a war happened, which would have more justification, for example, I know we debated World War II quite a lot last time, but I would assume you would say that World War II has more justification than many other wars. I'd assume you would concede. But if
100%.
Couldn't we use this justification or this reasoning that you've described to apply this to any war? That I could say World War II, that was all about profiteering. And
I will tell you, if you remember when we talked last time, I was very specific. I said, if this was really that critical, why aren't Americans there? Remember, I said that. I said, why aren't Americans there with American equipment, using American bombs? If it's that critical, why aren't we doing a D-Day invasion? Americans were there. Americans were in Iraq. Americans were in Afghanistan. If it was critically that bad, I believe Americans would physically. My Marines would be in there doing it right now. We'd be making a landing and taking Crimea. There'd be Marines taking Crimea. It's not that
simple, though. I mean, we're talking about.
I didn't say it was simple.
Yeah, well,
what I'm saying is, if it was. Let me finish my point. Okay. You said other wars. In every other war, Americans were there.
That's not true.
This is the one where they're not.
That's not true.
Vietnam, Americans there. Korea, Americans there. Iraq, Americans there. Syria, Americans there. Afghanistan, Americans there. World War II, all the Americans were there. Yes, every of them we talked about, Americans were there.
So
dying on the beaches or in the streets.
We do have Americans in Ukraine. We do have military personnel in Ukraine. They're just not fighting on the front lines. They're mostly in an advisory role. They're in an intelligence role. But this has also been 100%. The case in many wars as well. For example, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. We supported the Mujahideen. We supported them with guns with the Chinese. We put them actually on the backs of Chinese donkeys. It's a very interesting story. Because we couldn't control the major roadways, so we had to use donkeys to get them to them. But that was an example where we were definitely choosing a side of the war for different geostrategic reasons. It wasn't just profiteering the weapons companies. It was also because we wanted to undermine the Soviet Union. The United States and the United States governments, their foreign policy beliefs was that they wanted to undercut communism. They had an ideological commitment against communism. And so there were multiple contributing factors to America sending supplies to the Mujahideen over a 10-year period, even though we never directly put troops on the ground. The reason we don't have troops on the ground is, number one, we're talking about a confrontation between two nuclear armed states directly and their soldiers. And that is something a president, neither the Russians or the United States wants to cross. When that line was crossed in Syria with the Wagner group and the one battle where a bunch of Wagner guys died, they basically dropped it immediately because nobody really wanted to acknowledge what just happened. Right. So I think that's one factor as to why we don't have troops on the ground. Another factor we don't have troops on the ground is we just left Afghanistan, and Americans are tired of having troops deployed in foreign countries dying. Now, I would say that to even compare the war in Afghanistan when it comes to the deaths American soldiers took to the war in Ukraine is like there's an astronomical difference. If we had American troops on the ground in Ukraine, the casualties would probably be much higher than the casualties we took in Afghanistan, obviously. Of course. So not only are we talking about American casualties in the war in Ukraine, if we would have put troops on the ground, but much higher casualties than any war we've probably had since Vietnam, right?
I would bet that. I'd agree.
I think those factors came together to make the Biden administration say, look, the Ukrainians are willing to fight this on their own. They're saying that the main thing that they need to fight this is weapons. And so we want to preserve American lives, also make sure we don't have two nuclear armed powers fighting. So we're going to send them the weapons because we agree that it's a good thing to do, but we don't want to endanger U.S. soldiers.
Hold on, but did you see that there was a meme or a cartoon? I forgot. I think it's Ukrainian. I can't tell, to be fair with you, but because all I saw was what I saw was a English subtitle. So I think it was Ukrainian, but it might have been Russian or something. But it was basically the idea of a cartoon American and a cartoon Ukrainian. The Ukrainian soldier saying, when are you going to give us the stuff? And the American guy is like, wait. And the Ukrainian's like, well, they're building more stuff. Yeah, I know. Wait. And we just give them enough right when the Ukrainians have to go up against the horribleness of the Russian defenses. We didn't give it to them earlier at all. My point being is, in Afghanistan, in the 30 years we were there, 20 and then the 10 before, what did we do? We spent tons of money and energy and time, and we didn't make Afghanistan better. We spent 10 years in Vietnam. We didn't make it better. We spent how many years in Iraq? 10 years more? Didn't make that better. We didn't make Syria better. We're not going to make Ukraine better. Ukraine's going to be the same or worse. I mean, it's got to be worse. It's being bombed. It's going to be worse whenever we leave. We're going to leave when we're ready, whenever that is. We're not going to care about the Ukrainians. We're going to care about Zelensky, whether he's in a better spot or a worse spot. We will not care either way. If he's in a spot where he's a dictator for life, or they're going to throw him out tomorrow, we will not care. We will walk away with all the goodies. Happy we beat the Russians up. Happy that, X thousands of Ukrainians lost their lives, limbs. Happy that X thousand Russians lost their lives, limbs. We will have a field manual. We learned our field manuals for the urban fighting in Iraq. We learned it very well. And I don't know if you know much about American military, but we're now revamping all of our tactics. And even we're getting rid of the M16 for the M4. We're changing our weapons now for fighting in urban combat. I'll guarantee you this. 2 years from now, maybe a year from now, but I'm going to say 2 years from now, there will be new anti-drone weaponry that we'll be putting into place. There'll be new aquadrome defenses that we'll be putting into place. We're going to revamp our military with all new, brand new military-industrial complex stuff. We may even revamp the M1A1 tank because of this. So we haven't put our tank in there yet. By the time our tank goes in there, there's not going to be any war left. Whenever our tank goes in, there's no war. Because I know most people don't know this. In the entire history of the M1A1 Abrams, we've lost 9 tanks. 9. One by friendly fire, and the other 8 we scuttled because they got mobilized. We've never lost an M1A1 in the 40 years it's been in play in combat. Never. We're not about to, because people want to buy our tanks and we go into the next thing. And this is all about military-industrial complex. I'm not saying you're wrong with anything you said. I'm saying Americans don't give a shit. We never did. And it's embarrassing because we should. We actually gave a shit in World War II. We actually cared about repairing these countries. We actually created NATO. We did something to actually try to defend. We haven't done that since World War II. Kinda Korea, but not a great job of it. And then after that, not at all. We abandoned Vietnam. We abandoned Afghanistan. We abandoned Iraq. We abandoned Syria. We will abandon. I'm not saying anything bad about Ukrainians, man. I don't know them. I assume they're fighting hard. The things I see, they're fighting hard, trying. But I feel like we've made them pawns. And I think if we would not have funded this, the same outcome would have happened just a year earlier with less dead. And that, I think, is my underlying belief, that if we didn't fund, if the Ukrainians knew we're not going to fund you, you're not getting American stuff, and then other NATO might have been like, America's not doing it, maybe we're not doing it either. And the Ukrainians would have said, okay, let's negotiate. Now, that might have sucked for Ukrainians. But for the, do you happen to know how many Ukrainians have died so far? I actually don't know.
The numbers are extremely rough. It depends on which, like, it depends if you, like 100,000 to 200,000 is probably like a number range that is realistic.
So let's go low and go 100,000. That's 100,000 families wrecked that wouldn't have been wrecked, right? And I'm going to get a similar outcome. Maybe the Russians might have got a bit more land or a bit less or whatever, but I don't see the Ukrainian. I mean, look, as I said before, I hope I'm wrong. I hope a year from now, the Ukrainians have kicked the Russians off of their land and we've helped them. And the Russians say, we're so sorry. You're Ukraine. We respect your sovereignty. I hope all that happens. And I mean that with sincerity. I hope I come back in next year and eat crow. And I say, Dylan, I was totally wrong, man. It all turned out that way. I don't see it. I didn't think it last year. And so far from what I'm seeing, that's the way it's going. It's going to be 100,000 dead Ukrainians and a similar outcome.
Man, okay. So I think I disagree with you on literally everything, except for one thing. I do think we should have sped up weapons deliveries earlier. And I said this to you in DMs as well.
Yes.
But the reason that this happened, I feel like people are, and sometimes la land when they're talking about as to why these shipments were slowed. The first reason they were slowed, no one knew if Ukraine was going to last the first month. Everybody remembers the first month where nobody knew how Ukraine was going to do. Right? And so are you going to send your F-16s? Are you going to send your tanks? Are you going to send all your biggest, most expensive weapons? Patriot air defense, which has saved a lot of lives here. It saved lives in the cities that I'm staying at. I've seen it go to work, and it works. But you're not going to give that to Ukraine if the country's going to fall a month later. And so the first few months, you saw a lot of sliding into giving more and more aid as they saw the Ukrainian positions had stabilized and that they had the will to fight, which nobody could deny, that the Ukrainians most certainly have the will to fight. And so I think that's definitely an explanation for the first few months, but that's not the only reason why deliveries were slowed. We always heard this key word, and it's doomed me since I first heard it in relation to this war: escalation, right? Anytime we send anything to Ukrainians, it is an escalation. It's never called an escalation when Ukrainian civilian homes are bombed. It's never called an escalation when the Russians decide to use a new type of terror tactic or any of these things are unveiled. That's never an escalation. But when the Ukrainians punch back, it's an escalation. Or when we help them punch back, it's an escalation. But that is a genuine concern that people in the think tank community, people in the American government, and others, and Joe Biden, I believe, genuinely had, because they didn't know how the Russian government was going to respond or what means was at their disposal to respond. Because if you look at how they slowly advance in the aid that they're giving, you can see that they do something, they wait for a response, the Russians give maybe a strong statement, maybe they hit a few cities like in response, and then nothing really changes. And so then America pushes a little further. The entirety of America's aid to Ukraine program has been while it is slow rolling it when it comes to going to new heights. ATACMS, I think, is going to be the next example of this if that is inevitably sent. I don't think we can just contribute this out of, oh, they're doing this because they don't want Ukraine to win. I think that there were genuine fears of escalation and that they didn't know if Ukraine was going to be stable. But then once Ukraine stabilized, shipments increased drastically. And we have seen more and more progress on getting things like Western tanks to Ukraine, F-16s to Ukraine, Patriot air defense to Ukraine. So I think your analysis is extremely reductive.
Do you think that America, the United States, actually wants Ukraine to beat back the Russians so badly that there's an actual chance. I mean, so badly that there's actual chance of Ukraine moving into Russia. Like, it could be that good. You think America actually wants something like that?
Moving into Russia? Not moving into Russia, no. If we did want that, then we would have given them the ATACMS, because the fear of giving them ATACMS is, if we give them ATACMS, this is the same reason the Germans are holding back on the terrorist missile, but even though I've heard some things that I think that might be confirmed with a few adjustments, is because they're scared that they could use these weapons provided directly by the United States on cities like Moscow. Right? And they would rather it be the Ukrainians using commercial drones or something else doing that on their own, and it's not American direct weapons. Which that comes back to the fear of escalation. Because what if Russia decides, you know what, how about we bomb some border towns in Romania, which they have bombed areas very close to the Romanian border.
Maybe. I mean, maybe, but I don't know. If you look at our past,
it's not really. It's
if
not
you look
maybe,
at our past, we bomb everything. You look at our past in Iraq, we went into Syria. We bombed Kurdistan. We almost bombed, I think we actually once bombed the Turks because the Kurds were there or something like that. We did bomb the Turks once. So we did that just recently. In Vietnam, we were bombing Laos. We were bombing all kinds of stuff.
We bombed the Turks because of the Kurds?
Didn't we have them? Didn't we by mistake bomb Turkey once? I think we did when we were trying to fight the Al Qaeda was retreating into Kurdistan or something. I think we bombed the Turks one time. I mean, we were bombing everybody. I don't see that we were that concerned about that. I mean, we went into Syria. I mean, we went into Pakistan to get Bin Laden.
We could
didn't ask them nothing.
We could go into each one of these like foreign policy. We've jumped to a bunch of foreign policy issues. I'm not going to sit here and explain every single one of those.
So let's
wait. Let me just respond to that quickly though. In every single one of these cases you've given me, I'm sure if I sit down, I can find you reasons outside of the gun makers want to make money as to why the United States government took that position.
No. What I'm saying is, if we really want to win the war, we do what's required to win the war.
Yes.
If we really want to win the war.
I agree with that.
That wasn't my point is, I don't think America cares if Ukraine wins or not. And that is my entire point. I think the American government, not the average American, let me be clear, I don't want to insult Americans, because I actually do give a shit. But I think the American industrial complex, the elites in America, do not care if Ukraine wins or loses. Their best case scenario is stalemate, grind out the Russian forces down, because they like that. That's why they did in Afghanistan. They ground the Russian forces down for 10 years. They don't have to grind the Russian, because the Russians are nowhere as big as people say they are. Oh, they're huge. There's only 140 million Russians. That's not that many, right? There's about 120 million Japanese. Isn't that big of a deal? There aren't that many Russians, right? And we think there's so many. There aren't. They want to wear them down, break them up, and then go, oh, okay, Ukraine, give them these 3 regions or whatever they decide. And here's the best part. We'll probably do peace treaties. We'll start the peace talks without the Ukrainians even in the room. We do that all the time. We start deciding what the peace is, and the country that we're bombing or is being bombed, they don't even do that in the room.
Will you commit to that position? That's going to happen?
What's going to happen?
Because this is something that's been a steadfast position of the Biden administration, that no negotiations with Russia would happen on the future of Ukraine without Ukraine at the negotiating table. This has been a consistent position of the Biden administration. Would you dedicate yourself to that Ukraine is not going to be at the negotiating table?
I don't know. That's a tough one. Here's what I think. I will say. I said a year ago, and I'll say again. Peace treaty will be started by the Americans. They will decide. We will decide when peace is coming. Russians will not decide. Ukrainians will not decide. America will decide when the peace is coming. America will decide where it is. And the peace treaty, this is my call, and I will eat crow if I'm wrong. Okay. You're recording this, I'll say it openly. The peace treaty will be very similar to the lines right now. The lines that the Russians have right now, the peace treaty will be very similar to these lines right now.
That's similar to what you said last time we talked, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
I still believe it.
So
I haven't changed the thing on this.
I want to get back to that, because I really want to hit on a point about our last conversation in a moment, but I want to bring this back over to the different motivations, the motivations of the U.S. elites. Now, obviously, neither of us can read the brains of like the MSNBC host who says I support Ukraine, or the executive of some company that says I support Ukraine. In my experience, when talking to legislators or talking to like lobbyists who work in this, it's a mixed bag. Sometimes you'll find people who are there like, I'm here for the money, baby. You make good money doing this business. Other people, times you'll find people, definitely when it comes to people who are very pro-life and like lobbying on issues like that, or other issues that like they genuinely believe it, 100% true believers.
100%.
And I know a lot of the lobbyists who are going to DC to try to talk about Ukraine, 90% of them in my experience are true believers who really believe this. And in their experience, something that they've reported back to me, that they're actually running into American politicians who support Ukraine but will not publicly support Ukraine because of how politically toxic it has become. And if that is a report that I am getting back from American politicians, that does indicate to me that there is at least a certain amount in the American government, a certain amount of people elected to public office who do genuinely support Ukraine, right? And I don't think that's insane to believe. I think sometimes we kind of characterize congressmen as all like robots, like, and they're not like all, these people are individuals. They have their own beliefs. And so I just don't like this classification that it's all just done with no interest to whether the Ukrainians win or not. If that was the case, then we wouldn't have gone through all the work of continuing to push forward on the shipments that we're sending to the Ukrainians. And I also don't think that we'd be working on this international coalition in the first place. If it's about testing weapons and weapons doctrine, why are we trying to get the South Koreans to ship 500,000 artillery shells to replenish our stockpiles so we can send more artillery shells to the Ukrainians? Why did we wear down our
all those questions?
Javelin stockpiles, for example? We sent over so many javelins to the Ukrainians that we didn't have enough to fill other delivery requirements to Taiwan and other countries as well. We are taking... I don't believe that we can just we can say that the American government doesn't want Ukraine to win. I can even show selfish reasons as to why they would want Ukraine to win. Ukraine is a very resource-rich country with a burgeoning tech sector that's going to explode after this war, especially considering how stable the tech sector has been in comparison to other sectors in the Ukrainian economy. It is a country that, strategically speaking, is in a very good position when it comes to the Black Sea and its position. There are, I could give selfish reasons as to why America would want Ukraine to push out all the Russian soldiers. I also think there's ideological reasons that I don't think can be underplayed either, that I do believe that there are true believers. So my only pushback against you, Larry, isn't that these people who are greedy and are just doing it for weapons, the enjoyment of weapons, or to write out these manuals, that they don't exist. I don't like the reductive analysis. And I think that you're reducing it down this in the way you're describing it, especially considering how widespread Ukraine's coalition is, and the coalition supporting Ukraine.
So let me answer all those questions. Number one, are there individual Congress people who do believe in Ukraine? And the fight? Yes, of course. But who is talking to them? Their advisors. Many of their advisors are saying Ukraine's the right answer. Why? And they're giving them very emotional reasons to believe these things. And my congressperson is AOC, and you will hear her often talk emotional reasons. But what is she really concerned about? Often jobs. Why? Why do we want to make a massive coalition of all these people? Because the more people who join NATO, you may know this already, as you join NATO, part of joining NATO is you are required to buy NATO gear. A lot of that NATO gear comes from America.
Yep.
That's correct. You must do that, which means a lot of that comes from American companies and international companies that are backed by America. More NATO people means more people buying American goods, American stuff, international corporations who buy all these weapons. And that's one reason why they'd be more than happy to have all these people doing these things. Not just that. Of course you want South Korea sending javelins. Send every javelin possible.
Well, no, wait. South Korea didn't send javelins. South Korea sent artillery shell stockpiles.
Sorry. Yeah. I want them to send every shell and every javelin and every go back and get the AT-4s from the 80s and send them too. Have you seen how many Bradleys got blown up? They sent all those Bradleys to get blown up. All those Bradley fighting machines destroyed.
How many Bradleys were blown up? Because,
I don't know, but there were dozens that were blown up. So they sent dozens of them to be blown up. I don't know how many, but I know there were dozens that were blown up. They sent them too. Why not? I now have to rebuild them. What you don't understand is when you begin to rebuild, The rebuilding structure in America today, the military-industrial complex has the most jobs. The Defense Department has the most jobs of any government group. It has the most physical jobs it's responsible for, meaning private sector that has contracts. So, and they're always in multiple states. Everyone benefits because they'll build a tank in 5 states because now 5 senators get jobs. This is a common thing that happens all the time. Now, does that senator know? Does someone tell that senator or someone like AOC, hey, AOC, this is about the dollars? Of course not. They go to AOC and say, AOC, look, this is important. Democracy, jobs is valuable. You should care. And she believes it. And she goes, yes. And she talks about it. But in the back, they're going, good, more stuff for us. They've been told these things. I don't think the average person who supports Ukraine thinks any of this. I think the average person who supports Ukraine cares about people, cares about democracy, thinks Russians are bad. And they are. That's true. I'm not supporting Russians at all. And they are bad. And that's true. My point is the military-industrial complex is using all of that, taking advantage of all these feelings, taking advantage of all this up to grow. Do I think they started the war because of that? No. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I don't believe that stuff. Do I think they were ready?
I thought that was your position. Yes. Okay, please clarify, because at the start of this debate, that's what it sounded like your position was. Your position was this. No. Okay, it isn't. Okay.
My position is they saw it happening. Like, I don't believe that. And some people do. I may make some of your audience angry. I don't know. I don't believe, for example, 9/11. I don't think the 9/11 was a government job. Some people believe that. I don't believe that. Do I believe the Bush administration was ready for something like this, to put in the Patriot Act and to invade Iraq? I think, yes, he was ready for it. So when it happened, he then initiated. So I think the same thing in Ukraine. I don't think the military-industrial complex started this war. The Russians started this goddamn war. It is their fault. They started this war. My point is, oh, good. They literally said what they always say: never let a crisis go to waste. Thank you, Russians. They thought for invading Ukraine, we will now make a killing. So that's what I think happened.
So when it comes to the selling of weapons, now obviously it's not only going to be American companies, it's going to be German companies, it's going to be companies like all across Europe. Rheinmetall, for example, I think they just confirmed they're going to be probably sending drones to the Ukrainians. But when it comes to NATO standardization, that is, I don't think you were saying it isn't, it's like, you know, like it's all just great. It's very important for NATO security for you all to be using the same ammunition, same weapons, because this war, if anything, this war has shown how important that standardization is, because if Ukraine was just working off of just Western equipment systems, and it'd probably be a lot easier to ship, you know, the foreign, you know, artillery shells, the weapons that we're giving them, it'd be a lot easier for us to be supporting them. I just wanted to clarify.
Literally, I was the Marine Corps back in the 80s, right? And I've worked with ROK Marines, Republic of Korea Marines. And yes, we used to use the same ammunition. We could actually go back and forth. Their amphibious vehicles were on our ships. Like, we could swap ships. Yeah, we do it with South Korea. That's why they can ship goodies, because they use the same stuff. Their artillery, we could use their artillery. They could use ours. 100%. Yes, I agree. It's a great idea. I'm in.
So the second thing I wanted to say, and I just want to hit on this one last time before I moved on to my big point that I've been wanting to make since the beginning of this. So the second thing I wanted to say here is just, ever since man has found the ability to sharpen rock, man has been selling sharpened rocks. And any engagement where people are bashing each other's heads in, he's going to love that. He's going to want to try to grow his business off of that. And that's just how capitalism works. You want to maximize your profits. And so these companies, I just want to hit one more time, no matter how moral any war is, they are going to try to profit off of it. Every country in the world has a industry of some sort. At least every extremely influential major world power in the world has some sort of defense industry which profits off of world conflict. That is just true. And I just wanted to throw out there that if there was a bunch of different reasons for America or any country to support Ukraine, those reasons would exist independently of the personal interests of the financier class and of the people in the weapons manufacturing industry. I just want an acknowledgement of that.
I'm not sure I agree, and here's why. Because America is very special in this case. Why do I say that? Because American weapons are, in most cases, not all, but in a majority, superior to the others. That's true. In most cases, American weaponry is superior. So we have an advantage there. Second advantage, we're not dying. So, and we're also not buying. We're just making. We are just winning in this one, right? The Russians are taking a bath here when it comes to their weaponry. They've got to keep making it, keep making it. Ukrainians, of course, they don't have an industry that can make it. They're getting crushed both physically and in every other way. But America's, we're just making cash. But it's a second piece on top of it. We have the largest military-industrial complex in the entire world. Ours dwarfs the top, what, 10 or 20 behind it? I mean, it's insane how big it is, so massive. And it's a massive part of our actual industry in America, and it's political on top of it. The average guy in Norway or whoever who's going to make a special, rifle or a special uniform or such, he or she is just a guy who has a company who makes rifles. That's all he is. That's not tied to the Norwegian, government. That's not tied to all these things. There aren't millions of people working in the industry. It's a guy who makes guns in Norway, whatever that is. This America is part of who we are. It's a whole different issue. But I want to go to the second piece. Not just that. The guy who makes whatever special uniforms in Norway, he doesn't have a financial sector in that country that's going to back him like that. I mean, they do have the sovereign fund, but a sovereign fund wouldn't do that. We have a massive financial sector. You said something very important. You said Ukraine had and it did, and probably still will, have a tech sector, right? A massive tech. I know I had a couple of friends who actually had to pack up and leave Kiev because of what was happening.
Gigantic.
Who's going to finance who's going to finance that rebuild? American financiers. And whatever control they didn't have, now they're going to have. BlackRock's going to own half that damn country after this.
Wouldn't that also be a motivation for these financiers wanting Ukraine to win? Because if there's any way that their investments could turn sour, is if they invest in Ukrainian infrastructure for 10 to 15 years, and then the war starts up again because it was a frozen conflict, Russians look to win and go back in. Wouldn't that be a motivation for these contractors to want Ukraine to win?
Which is why there will be a peace treaty that will satisfy the Russians. That's exactly my point. There will be a peace treaty that satisfies the Russians, and then BlackRock through Blackstone or UBS, one of the most corrupt banks on the planet, is going to let Russian oligarchs get their money back again.
Wait, when you say satisfies the Russians,
times.
This is the thing. Okay,
yes.
When you say satisfies the Russians, what do you mean by that?
Yes, that Putin can claim a victory.
So that
there will be a peace treaty where Putin can claim victory. That is and I'll say that now in front of you. That will happen. The peace treaty will be a treaty where Putin can claim victory. You're
making a lot of hard 100%. Predictions here, and I'm just gonna say this war has humbled a lot of people when it comes to hard predictions about Ukraine falling in 24 hours. About this is gonna happen.
I never said that though.
And I just want to say, and we're gonna talk about this in a moment. Russia just went through like a Wagner mutiny where their soldiers were marching on Moscow. The ruble is hitting some all-time lows. I just don't know if I'd be so bold in making these types of predictions.
I'll make it right now. And I said it. The peace treaty will be similar, not exactly, similar to the lines today. And it will be a treaty where Putin will claim victory. Well, I'll say it now. Okay. I said it a year ago, and I still believe it.
Okay, well, let's talk about what you said a year. Well, it was less than a year ago we had this conversation.
Was it? I don't remember how long
it was. It was 11 months, but just about a year ago.
Oh, but, okay, there we go. Yes, it was about a year ago.
And you had the same position then, that the positions then would basically be the same as they are now. But you were wrong, because the positions since then changed. Since our last conversation about the war was uploaded, and it was September of last year, I did some of the math about actually what has changed when it comes to areas of control. There, of course, was the Ukrainian counteroffensive to liberate the Kharkiv region and the Kherson counteroffensive. I was actually present in Mykolaiv during the Kherson counteroffensive. That was extremely intense fighting.
I remember that.
I remember sitting 3 miles from the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and hearing shelling so intense, I would hear 50 explosions in a 30-second time period. But during that fighting, after all that bloodshed was done, what's the result? Well, after that period, we have seen 19 in the last, and this is just in the last, since we've last talked, 19 to 20,000 square kilometers of territory liberated. We saw the only provincial capital that the Russians captured for the entirety of this war, the city of Kherson. We saw that liberated. The Kharkiv counteroffensive liberated over 500 settlements. That included cities like Kupiansk and Izium, which uncovered the largest mass grave in Europe since the Yugoslav genocide, over 440 bodies. The counteroffensive to... point is, there's been a lot of land retaken, but it isn't just the colors on the map that have changed since we've last talked. One second, I've got a few things written down here I wanted to make sure that I mentioned.
Please, go ahead.
in those settlements, farms, and villages and cities, which the Ukrainians have liberated, because some people just treat it like it's colors on a map. Hundreds of thousands of those citizens were freed from an extremely brutal occupation that had constant human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, kidnappings and deportation of children, indiscriminate attacks on civilians, the use of sexual violence against civilians, and a lot more. And this is just the few of the things I described. I could get into more graphic detail. This I don't know if we want to call it the liberation, whatever terminology you want to use, but this has saw hundreds of thousands of people liberated, 20,000 square kilometers, cities liberated, and cities safer. I went to Kharkiv for the first time in a while, about 3 months ago, and I had visited it a year ago when the city was still in range of Russian artillery. Because of the Kharkiv counteroffensive, the artillery guns were pushed back further, and 60% to 70% of the strikes that were happening on that city stopped. People came back. The city started becoming more active. I went to an aquarium that was open and saw dolphins in Kharkiv because the artillery guns were pushed back. And so when you said that the line since last time wouldn't change or would basically be the same, I mean, you were wrong. And why would you be right this time?
So how much land
20,000 square kilometers have been taken.
No, how much has the Russians taken of Ukraine?
I've calculated that. That's that includes the 19 to 20,000. That's in the number.
No. I'm saying if you look at all the land the Russians have taken, right, from Ukraine, how much have they taken overall from Ukraine? Do you happen to know that number?
About 13%.
13% of Ukraine?
Yes.
Okay. So now what percentage do they own about?
Well, they own about 13%. I mean, you asked me, what do they own right now? They own 13%.
What I'm saying is 20,000 kilometers. I don't know how much that is by percentage. In other words, did they own 14% and now they own 13%?
It was probably like 20%. Now they own 13%.
That's significant. Okay, if it's 20 to 13, that's significant. And
I'm shooting the numbers off the top of my head, but I know it was significant enough.
Let me see if I can find it out now.
Just as an example, the only provincial capital that the Russians captured, the city of Kherson, was liberated, right? Either way, we're talking about tons of territory and hundreds of thousands of people. Territory that is actually larger than some small European states, by the way.
All right. I'm trying to figure if I can find this. It's just to what I just. Okay, this I don't know if you want to believe Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia, 119. I think I got it right. 100. I'm sorry. A total of 161,000 kilometers. Square kilometers.
161 square kilometers are still occupied?
I think that's what I'm saying.
Somebody's getting back to me right now, and they're telling me about the percentages. So the Russians controlled 27% of the country in March, and now they control 13% of the country. Now, I would say that is pretty significant when it comes to changing the map and how aid has contributed. And when we talk about this, I don't want to just say, oh, aid was somewhat supplemental. Aid was somewhat essential, I would say, or really essential for Ukrainian operations. The HIMARS disrupted Russian supply depots. The long-range missiles like the Storm Shadow have been railing the Kerch Bridge, which is the vein for the Russian occupation in the south of the country. It was made for that reason. We have seen air defense greatly reduce the amount of missiles that are hitting Ukrainian cities and saving the lives of civilians. And when some people talk about how can military aid save lives, that's a great example of air defense saving lives, pushing back the artillery, like I said earlier.
I'm not fighting. Yeah, I'm not fighting any of that.
Well, you are fighting it though, because you said.
How am I fighting it?
Last conversation we talked, you said that the map wouldn't change, and you came into this conversation of the idea that it hadn't, but it has significantly changed, and I honestly believe that isn't because.
No, to be clear,
let me
changed. I don't think it changed that much.
I do think that the Kharkiv and Kherson counteroffensives were significant change. I do think that was a significant shift in the front line. In fact, the Kharkiv counteroffensive was so humiliating for the Russians that they had to say it was NATO soldiers leading the way because they didn't want to admit that their front line had been broken through as brutally as it was there, because their front line was just too thin to hold back the Ukrainians and their troops too experienced to hold back Kraken and other assault brigades that I've interviewed many of those soldiers that were involved in this counteroffensive, which were just basically taking city after city after city, and the Russians had no clue where they are. They were traveling so fast. And so I do think it's significant, and I honestly don't believe it was like I don't think you operate in malice, and I don't believe you didn't know this out of malice. I just think our media is really bad in covering this and talking about how many successes we've had. Let me talk about some data.
That's 100% accurate.
Let me talk about some data that was recently produced by, I believe it's like the Reagan Institute, which I don't like, but they're the only one that I've known that's pulled this data. And I was
doesn't mean it's wrong.
It doesn't mean it's wrong, and
right.
They're the only one I've seen that pulled this data, and I thought it was super interesting, and I'd like to see more institutes pull this data. Right now, we're about 50-50 when it comes to the country and sending aid to Ukraine. I don't know if you saw that recent CNN poll, but if you include the margin of error, it's about 50-50, right? Which to me is a little concerning to see that decrease,
yes,
right? But something that I thought was interesting is that when the Reagan Institute included some of the information I included with you, for example, Ukrainians control 83% of their country, and that the Ukrainians have taken back, they've taken back a significant amount of their land. They include a few key facts, and I'm not talking about like debatable facts. I mean like clear, like this is just a true statement of fact. Once you include that information about how the Ukrainians have used aid, numbers jump 15 to 20 points. Numbers jump the most with Republicans, making it actually majority of Republicans, after informed about this, than supporting aid to Ukraine. And that really shook me, because we went from 50% to about 70% in overall support for aid to Ukraine.
I agree with this, and I think your point's valid. You have made me rethink. I did not think there was that much of a movement on the front line. How would I know? I didn't find this institute that you found. The average American's not going to find this institute. They're not going to find it either, right? We're not going to look for that. And if you look on any mainstream news, no one's really talking about this issue this way. It's just the war keeps going, the war keeps going, the war keeps going, right? And I get that. And Americans are getting tired of it. And if they don't hear these things, to your point, they're going to get tired of it. And once they get tired of it and election season comes around, there's going to be a peace treaty. And whatever the line is now, it's going to be close to that line whenever that peace treaty starts happening, because they're not going to give up that much stuff. I would argue, and I still stand by this, whatever the treaty is, Putin will be able to say it is a win. I stand by that. Even if it's more or less than it is now, I may be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, dude. I'm serious. I hope I'm wrong. But I can't imagine Putin accepting any type of peace treaty where he can't claim that he won.
Well, that's why I want to remove the element of him having a choice in the matter. As in, like, if the situation goes bad enough for him, I mean, you can't really like if we're like, Hitler didn't have a say when he was retreating from France,
right,
or whether he retreats from France. He was put in a position where he had to, and that's what I think would be the best case scenario, where it's not really a debatable issue. It's just, well, the Russians lost, so they lost, and it is what it is, and the Russians will just have to accept it, as many other countries have done.
Do you actually think in your heart that Putin would accept defeat? And this is just obviously we can't read Putin's mind, but my gut tells me Putin is in a spot now where he can't lose, meaning he loses like his life might end.
Well, so he doesn't want to lose. That doesn't mean he can't lose. He really doesn't want to lose.
My point is, he does have a lot of, tricks up his sleeve that he could use, to include bringing Belarus into the war, to include nuclear weapons. He has other things he could use. And if there is no other option, my worry is he would use them. And I think American leadership will think that also. And that's why I believe there'll be a peace treaty. Let's say tomorrow, and I don't know where Frontline is, that Ukrainians have a breakthrough and they start, exploding and moving in towards Russia. We did this in the Israeli war when the Israelis were moving against Cairo. We stopped the war because we didn't want the Israelis to occupy Cairo, and we literally stopped the war. And what I'm saying is, if the Ukrainians break through, and I know I'm being crazy, but I believe it, we've done it before, if they actually break through and start moving on towards Russian territory, America steps and says, stop your offensive right now, stop it, or we can stop all aid. Stop it right now.
Well,
it will literally stop it.
Wait.
That's what I believe.
So I am not too terribly interested in Ukraine conquering Russia. It's not the reason I got involved in supporting Ukraine or filming the stuff that I film here. Of course, I have an interest in recording history. That's the main reason I'm here.
Sure.
But
sure.
What was that thing that Washington Post editor said? The first draft of history is journalism. I do really believe in that.
Yes.
Man, I lost my train of thought for a moment. Okay, 1 second. What were
I'll
you
go
saying?
back. My,
Yes,
my
yeah.
point being is, I don't think America would allow Ukraine to have a massive breakthrough
So
to push through, because I think they're afraid of Putin, and they would stop it before Putin would either bring Belarus into the war or use tactical nukes or whatever is the thing they're afraid of. I can't see them doing it.
I don't think the Belarus entering the war thing is. There was a lot more fear at the early stages of that. I haven't heard rumblings about that in a very, very long time. And I mean, a lot of it's rumors, because Belarusian politics is very insular, very like back rooms. It's not exactly the most liberal democracy in the world. I mean, like Lukashenko's like cartoonishly dictator. He like admits to it. Yeah, I'm a dictator. Yeah, what of it? Like, at least I'm not gay. And that's a real quote from him.
Yes, I believe that completely.
But his military leadership doesn't want to engage in a war. I don't think he wants to engage in a war. I think he saw how badly this gone, and a second march on Kiev would probably not be a brilliant idea, which a lot of people talk about when it comes to Belarus. I've talked to the sappers, the mine layers who have prepared the border region with Belarus. The place is a death trap. That's not to mention the fact, because a lot of the local, I'm kind of nerding out right now. Tell me if I ever get too long-winded. But a lot of the local beaver dams have been like completely left alone by the locals, because the locals abandoned the areas, and that's flooded a lot of the area. It's just, it does, I don't believe that's going to happen. Nobody that I know that knows more than I do, because there are a lot of people who know more than I do, seems to believe that that's much of a real possibility. It's not impossible. It's just, there's not really many motivations for Lukashenko to do this. Putting that aside, when it comes to the nuclear question, I always thought this was a very interesting question, because I have a fear about nuclear weapons in the opposite direction. And my fear is that if we do not uphold our end of the bargain when it comes to the Budapest Memorandum, which was a commitment we made to the Ukrainians, it wasn't just we made it, the Russians made it as well. They just haven't been particularly great at upholding it, where they would give up their nuclear arsenal, which, as we've known, has been a great deterrent the world over to stop invasion. That's one thing you can definitely say about nuclear weapons, that they would give up the nuclear arsenal because we wanted to see a denuclearized world, or at least walking in that direction. We didn't want 50 states with nuclear weapons. Who knows how stable their governments are? Who knows how corrupt they are? Sell to terrorists? Who knows? We thought it was in the interest of the world stability for them to give up the nuclear arsenal, and they agreed to. And so I don't think it sends a good message if the end of this is Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal, then it lost half of or 20 to 30% of its country. The lesson is, don't give up your nukes, keep your nukes, don't trust anyone, don't make agreements to give up your nukes. What message does it send to the Iranians? What message does it send to the North Koreans? What message would that send, I don't know, the Eritreans, whoever would be interested in getting a nuclear weapon? The goal, which I think all people should have, which is eventually a world without nuclear weapons. Some hardcore realists disagree with me because they say nuclear weapons bring an age of peace. I think that it's just too dangerous to be in the hands of man. That's my opinion. If I want to pursue that goal, or I don't want to see a bunch of tin pot dictators all racing to get nukes because it's proven that that's the only thing that works, I think we need to support the Ukrainians through this and show that if you give up your nuclear weapons, the international community will support you.
That doesn't stop. Nothing you said I disagree with. I think you're right in everything you just said. But that doesn't stop Putin from going, stop the advance or I'll drop a nuke.
I mean, they can go like that. My main
stop him from doing that.
My main thing that gets me about Putin using the nuke is this is such a new standard for the use of nuclear weapons than the historical precedent on how the Soviets did it, or how the Russians did it, how anyone did it. I mean, we've gone from 2008, Vladimir Putin saying on national television after the invasion of Georgia that there's no ethnic issue in Ukraine. There's no issue in Crimea. He said that publicly because people were scared after the invasion of Georgia that was going to invade Ukraine next. People were right. Those people who were, fear mongers were right at the time. But people didn't know it, and he was pushing out that idea. I really don't think that Vladimir Putin is going to go from, in a 6-year period, because we're talking about 2008 to 2014, he went from there's no issue in Ukraine to I will blow up the world if we don't have this territory we didn't control 10 years ago. I find it very hard to believe that they've made that sharp in a change in nuclear doctrine, and none of their actions on the ground seem to indicate that. None of their moving around of the nukes, none of their rhetoric indicates that either. Now, that's the thing that people really sometimes disagree with me on. What do you
Oh,
mean?
the rhetoric has
exactly.
changed.
Yes,
Has changed.
the rhetoric has changed. But also, if you ever listen to when the rhetoric was the worst, it was never, if you do this, we will nuke you. It was always, we reserved a right in an instance where Russia's tech. It meant that they never made any commitment to actually use them, because if they did and then they didn't, that would completely degrade the value of their word on this issue, and would make it harder for them to use it in negotiations. And so until I hear the Russians say something along the lines of, if you take this, we will nuke you, it's hard for me to take the threats terribly too seriously when they're making it every other day, sometimes between like drinking sessions. Definitely if you talk about Medvedev, who is a notorious alcoholic.
But again, I don't feel, I mean, unless I've missed something, and perhaps I have, I don't feel like the Russians are really afraid that Ukraine's going to break through and start taking Russian territory.
Well, no. I don't think they are either. I don't think anyone's really afraid of that. The Russians, I think Vladimir Putin personally is probably most afraid of the political failure that would come with this war falling through. This strongman image completely falling through. He's going up. He's going 70 years age. He has people marching on his capital. And is it a coup? Is it a mutiny? He's already, he looks pretty wobbly already. And if the war completely falls through, I mean, that could be it for Putin. Either forced into retirement or, forced into retirement. You know what I mean?
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
I think,
and that is my point of this whole thing. This is why I say again, I stand by it. Whatever peace treaty comes, it is going to be one where Putin can say, see, I won. I liberated the Russian speakers from Ukraine, or whatever he's going to say. He's going to have his whole spin, and Ukraine is not getting all of its land back. That part I said earlier, I don't think it's going to happen now either. I think Ukraine's not going to get Crimea back, not going to get those eastern, I forgot the name of all the eastern provinces. It's not going to get the eastern provinces back. I don't believe so at all.
Let me ask you a question, because you said the same thing last time we talked, but then more territory was liberated. So what has changed between then and now that makes you like, okay, I was wrong then, but now when I say the same thing now, this time it's different?
Yes. I'll tell you why. Because what I was thinking then, which is obviously incorrect, is that they were just trying to get those eastern provinces. I don't remember the names of all the provinces, but the eastern provinces.
Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, Kherson?
Thank you. Yes, they were trying to get those. There was 3 of them. I don't remember the last one you said. Is that one of them too?
The ones that Russia has annexed, of course, is Crimea. Then there's Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. Those are the ones that they formally announced that they've annexed.
There we go. I think that they will try to get at least 3 out of those 4 to include Crimea. And I think at the end of it, they will own still in some way, shape, or form at least 3, if not all 4 of those areas.
Why?
That's what I think will happen.
Why 3 out of 4? What it just feels like these numbers.
That's how he can say victory.
Well,
no, because it's more than half, and he will claim victory. He doesn't have to actually win. He has to be able to tell a story that he was able to win, so he can be his strong man. And I think you're completely right. He's a strong man. It's the image. He's got to have at least 3 out of 4 of those, or he's not a winner. He's a loser, and he can't be a loser.
Why can't we just...
That's why I say at least 3 out of 4. That's what I believe.
Why can't we just, as long as the Ukrainians are willing, because it seems like a lot of the concern you've given is for the young generation of Ukrainians are dying.
Yes.
I would feel like, as a libertarian, and this is something that has kind of gotten me recently, is I remember growing up seeing all these like militia types and all these types like, man, I just wait till the Chinese land in West Virginia to take our valuable coal supplies. I'm gonna Uzi him and hit him with my Glock. And I hear these like fantasies. And then Ukraine faces this type of an invasion where its democracy is threatened and is facing a war, in my opinion. I don't know if the New Lines Institute produced a really good report recently about whether Russia is engaged in a form of genocide by targeting the Ukrainian national identity, by denying Ukraine is real, by kidnapping their children, by targeting their language and their cultural sites and stuff like that. Is this a form of genocide? And whether or not you agree with that or not, the fact that this discussion could be had in the first place does mean we've gotten to a level when it comes to human rights abuses that is an atrocity. It is atrocious, and it's something that people rightfully want to be liberated from. If we're uncovering the largest mass graves in Europe in locations like Izium, right? What does that mean for locations that have been under occupation for 8 years? What does that mean for locations that we could now sign away and make and legalize and institutionalize that occupation? We're seeing Vladimir Putin recently passed an executive order saying that he could take away the property rights of anybody who does not accept Russian citizenship and give them fingerprints with the Russian occupation. This is so they could help forcefully conscript more people into service, which is against international law. You cannot forcefully conscript people and annex or occupied territory. That is illegal. But if you see that type of occupation and you think, man, do we really want to legalize that? Do we really want to make that permanent? Most Ukrainians are willing to say, no, we will.
Any of that.
Well, let me finish.
Oh my God.
Let me finish. Well, no,
I don't want any of that.
Let me finish. I'm not saying you want it, but if Ukrainians are willing to fight and in many instances die in order to avoid that outcome, isn't that ultimately a decision for them if we're talking about the moral weight of the loss that a people decide 100%. If they're willing to fight for their own freedom?
Why would you think I don't agree with that?
Because it sounds like you're saying like it's not worth it to continue to send aid, and that, you know, all these Ukrainians are dying for nothing, or that all these people are dying for nothing. That's what it sounded like earlier.
Yes, because and it's not anything against Ukrainians. It's against our government. Our government, I believe, and I stand by this, is going to let those places become Russian no matter what we do. I think no matter what, look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope next year I'm like, dude, the Ukrainians took all 3 of those places. I was wrong. Holy shit, I was way wrong on this. I don't see them do it. I think if the Ukrainians broke through, I think the Americans would literally stop them. I think they would literally stop them, say, no. If you take 3 out of 4 of these, yes, and I believe it. I think they'll say no, because we have to make sure that Putin gets away.
Here's a question,
because
though.
I can't. That's what I believe.
Can the Americans stop them?
They'll say, we'll give you no more aid. We'll stop all the aid.
And what if
like
they
that?
just...
We'll stop all the aid.
Okay, but let's look at the scenario you just laid out again. There's a breakthrough. The Ukrainians are making advances. Yep. I assume if the Americans are telling them to stop, they're not telling them to stop because they're retaking Zaporozhye and Kherson. We're helping them try to retake Zaporozhye and Kherson right now. So it would probably have to be somewhere like Crimea, right? Because it's not going to be like they're actually annexing Russian land. Okay, so it's somewhere like Crimea. If it's gotten to a point where the Ukrainians could realistically retake Crimea, I think there's a very good chance the Ukrainians just say, we're near the end zone, man. We're near the end zone. We had that 9 years ago. I've met a lot of Crimeans who have been displaced for 9 years. I actually am about to publish an interview with one who are fighting specifically so they can go back to their old village, right? You think if those people get to the border with Crimea and the Americans say, nah, that makes us feel uncomfortable, that's going to stop them? I don't necessarily think that's a given, man.
My example is the Arab-Israeli war, where the Israelis, who were literally facing genocide, no question about that, the Israelis were literally facing being pushed off into the ocean. They were ready to march on Cairo. The Egyptian army was broken.
That
they
is
were moving
comparable.
to the Sinai,
it is
and they were going to move into Cairo, and the Americans said, stop. Do not move. And the Israelis stopped the Sinai and held the Sinai for I forgot how many years, a couple decades. They held the Sinai and then eventually gave the Sinai back to the Egyptians. The Egyptians have the Sinai now. They gave it back to them.
So
that is my example.
This is a terrible example. I mean, because we're talking about Israel marching on the capital of Egypt, right? We're not talking about Israel taking back what is Israeli land or thing, because there was never like a, oh yeah, Sinai Peninsula, yeah, that's Israeli land. We all recognize Israeli land. The international community recognizes all of this territory.
There were Israelis who actually thought that, but
there was some, but the majority was not pushing that, and it wasn't
true. But
when we talk about Ukraine, we're talking about territory that is internationally recognized as part of Ukraine. We're not talking about marching on Moscow. The only people marching on Moscow is Russia's own soldiers, right? So I don't think we can compare that to the retaking of your own territory. That was yours, like literally in your control 9 years ago. If I would expect America to say stop if they were marching on Moscow, because that is a situation where it's like, oh my God, nuclear incident. But we have yet to be given any piece of evidence, I think, substantially, that would make us think that, okay, if we march into Crimea, there will be a nuclear war, or this will be the.
I think here, if I hear the conversation going back and forth, what I'm getting from this is, I think you and I have a different thought process on the people in America who are giving aid and who are behind this war. You feel, if I read you right, that many of the people actually care about Ukraine, want Ukraine to have its sovereignty back. I don't believe that. I simply don't. I've met these people. I know them. I don't think they care at all about Ukraine. I think they care about getting as much as they can out of this, both in cash, in knowledge, in power, in political power, in market growth, in all the things that are bad. And the second that becomes, to their eyes, we've kind of maxed out.
I gotta get a clarification. You said
they're going to abandon the Ukrainians.
What do you mean by these people? Because like that is that.
Yes.
Do you mean all? You mean all the congressmen? You mean like all the lobbyists? Do you mean all like these people? Like that's like a. I don't know what that means.
Yep. But I'll tell you what it means. The people who are currently running the military-industrial complex, to include a lot of permanent Washington, a lot of lobbyists, and a lot of heavy industry people.
Oh, of course.
The leadership, but they run Washington, and the leadership of both the Democratic and Republican parties. I believe Joe Biden thinks this way too. I think Mitch McConnell thinks this way too. I think every one of the leaders thinks exactly, because that's where most of their money comes in from. They're the ones who control cash going out to the juniors. And the juniors, most of them are kept in the dark. Most of them are. Because they just know money comes from Nancy Pelosi, or if she's still in charge. I don't know if she's actually still in charge. I assume she still is. But money comes from Nancy Pelosi and her people. And I know she believes that. I know Joe Biden believes that. I know Mitch McConnell believes that, if he's even standing on his 2 feet anymore. They all believe that stuff. I really do believe that. So yes, that's what I think. And look, time will tell. Many times you and I have talked, I would have been disappointed if I was wrong. In this case, I will not be disappointed if I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. I hope I am wrong. I hope I am 100%. I am that jaded, right? I am that jaded, particularly when I watched so many, and maybe this is too personal for me, particularly when I've watched so many of my veteran brothers come back home from Afghanistan and Iraq for nothing, for literally nothing. I've had a talk, and this is personal only. This is not about Ukraine. It's just me personal. Mm-hmm. I'm just airing some personal shit. I've had to talk people out of pulling a trigger because of how horrible they feel. First ever, I had to ask a guy, where is the gun? He was in a hotel room, and he said, it's on the bed. I said, okay, great. Is there a chair there? Go sit down in a chair. Leave the gun over there. And I had to talk this guy metaphorically off a ledge. And that's happened more than once to me. For what? So Afghanistan can still be run by the Taliban? So Iraq can still be a disaster? So Syria can still be run by Assad? We've done nothing in these places. And I maybe I'm just too burned, Dylan. Maybe I'm just too fucking burned. And now I see Ukraine as another one of these. 3 years from now, we will abandon them to use our bankers to come in and finance everything, put Ukraine in debt for the next 30 years, and it'll wind up becoming a client state because they can't afford to pay the bills. That's my worry.
I mean, if the Russians got their way, there wouldn't be a Ukraine to be in debt in the first place. I think when we talk about these wars, none of these wars were essentially about a nation and a nation's identity survival. The survival of a nation state, or the survival of the national identity of a people, whether they themselves existing is up for question, which is what Putin announced this war with.
Israeli wars.
We were talking about Syria and Afghanistan, I thought. But
those. Okay, I thought of all the wars. Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I know there are other wars where people's national. Yes, of course. I thought of the wars, the more recent wars that we were directly involved in. Right.
Got it. Okay,
so
got it.
I don't think it's very easy to compare the war in Afghanistan and the wars in Iraq, not only because American soldiers aren't the ones doing the fighting and dying unless they directly volunteered, because American volunteers have died in Ukraine. Right. I know a lot of these international legionnaires, good people, good folks. I think that's one element that makes this distinctly different. So there's not a fear of Americans coming home like, oh, I'm going to engage in some horrible action or think about considering doing that, because we're not engaged in that way unless you've signed up for it. And if you signed up for it, that's your own decision, right?
No, I agree.
So I think that's one big distinction here. This is a national liberation struggle, and the people on the ground are actively want our support, have shown that they can use our support effectively, and our support has been used to improve the quality of living and to improve the amount of territory they have liberated. Like I talked about earlier with Kharkiv and how their city is not getting shelled as much, and all these major cities, how the air defense is protecting them. The liberation of Kherson, that only provincial capital the Russians have captured, in and of itself is evidence of the success of our shipments, is a success in and of itself. If the war ended today, we would have had much more victories and liberations and more people living under a nation state where they can practice their national identity. They can practice their national identity. They can be open in their national identity. They're part of a democracy. They're part of their own country, that not occupied by a foreign occupant. So I do think that in and of itself is a success already. If the war ended right now and the lines were what they are, our aid would have already been successful in liberating, I think, potentially millions of people. So I think that already.
Okay, let me then.
So even if we don't get all of Ukraine liberated, let's say we just take back Kherson and Zaporozhye, or we get back to 2014 lines. But even if just through sheer force and negotiating some type of frozen stalemate, that in and of itself would be a type of success that I don't know would have been possible if it wasn't for Western aid.
So they'll do two things I'll bring up. Number one, do you honestly feel that if we go back to 2014 lines, that there was no way that with the sheer power and influence of America, we couldn't have simply made that treaty before hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians and Russians died? I think we could have. Are you telling me that if we actually saw it, clearly we saw it coming. We were talking about it before it came. Will they invade? Won't they invade? So we were talking. It's not like Putin didn't telegraph this, right? Are you telling me that we as Americans couldn't have said, whoa, look, we don't want this to happen. Let's have a conversation. We'll give you the win, Putin. We'll give you some kind of win. Something. We couldn't have made some type of deal. We could have bought his oil or something. I'm making this up, but you're telling me we couldn't have done that? We did nothing. We let this happen as it was happening. We sat back. If we probably encouraged it. I don't have any evidence of that, but I feel that it's just my emotion. But we surely let it happen.
That way?
Yes, but we surely let it happen. Okay. I feel like we encouraged it, but either way, we let it happen.
I feel like you're wrong.
This guy do this horrible thing, and I feel like we could have stopped him. But let me go another spot then.
Well, wait. Can we address that point quickly?
Yeah, please.
I've heard. I know there's so much speculation about peace deals and what was said behind closed doors, and these are things that we probably won't know. Like, obviously, if there was something said behind closed doors that I don't know about, that'll be revealed 10 years from now. Maybe. I have no control, and obviously I could be wrong. But I don't know what deal we could have offered the Russians at the start of this war that would have been a significant enough concession that the Ukrainians would have accepted, other European powers would have accepted, that could have prevented war and wouldn't have just kicked the can down the road. Because the last thing we would want to do is concede things to the Russians, like say, okay, fine, Ukraine will never be in NATO, and we'll bring back our nuclear umbrella, we'll bring it back, we won't cover Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, whatever is necessary to avoid the war. And they're like, great. Then they wait 2 years and then invade again. That isn't something that's below them. I mean, they have engaged in behavior like that in the past, right? I mean, they said they wouldn't invade in the first place. When they were invading in 2014, they said they weren't invading in the first place, right? This whole thing, they have gotten around calling it an invasion by calling it a special military operation. So it's not like they couldn't be dishonest about this type of behavior. So that's something that also concerns me, that we could end up conceding to them, giving them what they want, encouraging the behavior, and then not only that, just kicking the can down the road and having another generation of Ukrainians dying.
There is a difference, though.
Okay,
There's a difference. Let's assume for a moment we actually made a peace treaty. That we made one. I'm with you. I don't know what we could have done, but let's say we did that. We said, look, we're gonna agree. Ukraine.
Okay, so I should take that question off my list. Then I was gonna ask you, what's your peace treaty then? Because if I hear somebody ask for peace, I would be like, okay, what's your offer? Because
I will cover that one too. Let me pretend that this is 20. This is now before they invade, right?
Gotcha.
This is 20. They invaded in 2021, 2022.
It depends.
Right?
Which invasion do you mean? I assume you mean
the current
22.
The current one, yes. Yeah, 22. So it's 2022, and we come up with a plan that everyone agrees to. We go, Ukraine's not going to become in NATO, and these 3 provinces will be like semi-autonomous. and we agree to that, and we're not gonna, we're not gonna ask, we're not gonna have the nuclear shield against the Baltic states. We agree to that, and Russians agree to it. We all agree, we all sign, it's all positive. Everyone's hugs and kisses, right? We do that. 2 years later, the Russians start screaming and invade again. Now there's an actual reason for the entire world to be like, whoa, 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 you can't do this. There'd be nowhere near the same reticence back and forth that there would have been if we would have done that, assuming that this would have even happened. Who knows? But what if I could have given the Ukrainians 2 more years to build out their economy, 2 more years to build out their infrastructure, 2 more years to be trained on Western equipment, 2 more years to do that? I would have taken it, to be forward with you. If I could have done that, if I was president and I could have made a peace deal and that was my deal, I would have done it. I would have given Ukrainians 2 more years to defend themselves, put something out there. I would have done it if I could have done it. I would have 100%. Right? I would have done it. So that's, so to answer your question, what is my peace deal now? My peace deal now is whatever will stop people from dying, that will make Ukrainians satisfied, and that will give Putin a win. Satisfy Ukrainians and give Putin a win, whatever that is.
Those two things are completely contradictory, though. This would be like, I would be like, we need to do like equal Jim Crow. It's like these are words you can't put these things together.
So you're telling me that Ukrainians will not be satisfied unless they have all their territory back?
Absolutely, yes. I'm 100% confident in that.
That's not what some Ukrainians are saying.
Well, some Ukrainians I would imagine, because
yes,
I mean, there's people
correct.
who believe anything in every country, right?
Yes, but there are people who are saying, well, no, that may not be the right answer. I just saw, I see if I can find it. I just saw an interview with someone who was like, they used to be part of the government. I don't know who they are now. And they were saying, no, Ukraine would probably take 2014 lines. Ukraine does not want Crimea back, stuff like that. They say things like that, and I hear those kind of things often. So I'm not so sure. At one point, you're tired of having your young people die. At one point, you're tired of them dying. I don't know when that point is. I mean, but at one point, you're tired of them dying.
I'm not saying that it is impossible that Ukraine could ever accept a deal that would mean they wouldn't have all their territory. My answer is that they would never be satisfied with it. This because people can accept deals because they have to, even if they're not satisfied with it. When the French accepted giving up Alsace-Lorraine to the Prussians, to Otto von Bismarck, that wasn't because they were satisfied with it. It's because they didn't really have much of a choice. And so if it's that they have done counteroffensive for like 2-3 years and they haven't made any progress, they're like, look, we've had all these people die for the cause of Ukrainian liberation, but it's not achievable for this generation. It's just not going to happen. Then I assume that at some point there would be a breaking point, but we haven't reached it yet. They still have gas in the tank.
But I would like them to not reach that breaking point.
Well, I don't want them to reach that breaking point either.
100,000 Ukrainians to die.
Well, that also assumes that.
Up to them. Wait,
this also assumes that if the war ends, or at least takes a freeze, that people stop dying. That also assumes that, like, the extrajudicial killings stop, that the other human rights abuses stop, which I would feel that if once there's a ceasefire or anything, the Russians would probably want to tighten their grip on power as much as possible. That's part of Putin's executive order, to make it easier to deport people who oppose his rule. And permanently, many people would call ethnically cleanse the population that does not identify as Russian.
That's accurate.
And kick them out of their land. And so that's part of the reason why Ukrainians are so unwilling to compromise, because after Bucha, there was no negotiation to be had. People talk about Boris Johnson and all these other things, but after Bucha, nobody in Ukraine was in a talking mood, and they're still not in the talking mood.
Maybe I can't tell you that, but I would like the war to end. If the U.S. if I'm the president of the United States, I'm trying to end this war tomorrow. I'm trying to. Hey, what can we do? How can we stop the killing? I'm tired of having Ukrainians losing their arms and legs for this. Right? I would like this to stop. I would like the Wagner Group to stop doing what it's doing. I would like all these things to stop. I would try to stop it if I could. If I can't, I can't. I can't stop Ukrainians from fighting if they want to fight. Obviously, you're right. They want to fight. They should fight. But let me go one step further, though. What if the reverse happens? What if the Russians all of a sudden break through and they move back into the same areas they conquered before? Would that change your mind at all? Would you say, okay, stop. Let's have a peace? We say no. It doesn't matter if they take Kiev, keep fighting. Would that change your mind?
It all depends on the strategic situation on the ground. If there was something we could do, like let's say they have a breakthrough, but there's something we could do to counter it, then obviously I would favor that. Or what ultimately I would. It's almost certain that my position is going to be informed on what Ukrainians believe or what they feel or what they're willing to deal with and put upon their shoulders. Because I'm not going to force a liberation struggle on somebody who's not willing to deal with, you know, the high cost of freedom, because freedom isn't free. You know, somebody has, if you're going to ring the Liberty Bell, someone has to pull the rope, right? And, you know, that's not always easy. But if there was a situation where it was a question of like, there is either going to be a Ukraine, even if it's like much smaller than it should be, or no Ukraine, then obviously I'm going to choose a Ukraine. And I'm sure most Ukrainians would also choose that. But that's why I think we should increase weapon shipments to make sure that isn't the outcome that happens. We should increase aid. That's why, to try to avoid that type of an outcome. I mean, and well, let's also say that, like, I do want to say that I believe that whether Ukraine wins in the way that they want to win, as in liberation of all of their land and you know, independent sovereignty, stuff like that, or at least some semblance of sovereignty, of course, foreign capital, stuff like that. But I don't think that, God, I lost my train of thought again. Oh, damn. And I had a good train of thought too. It was a good train, the fast train.
No, my point is the same thing. I hope that you are right. I don't see the Russians losing much more ground. I think their defenses have been dug in. I don't think they're going anywhere. I think they're going to stay basically where they are. The trench warfare that's happened now, I think America now has all the data it needs to build its new weaponry, has all the data it needs to build its new field manuals on how to fight now in trench warfare.
Okay, let me ask you, is that something you feel, or is that something that you've been like, yeah, they've gathered all the data, they don't need to do it anymore?
Oh, no, I just feel that. I have no, okay. I know they're gathering data, and I know people in the military who've even said that. I know that is happening. So the fact that it's happening, I am 100% sure of. It is my personal opinion, it's enough now. That's just my personal opinion. Take that for whatever you want.
When did it become enough? And when did it become enough? Because I have not been given any indication that you know, they've stopped gathering until, or like they no longer benefit.
No, they're going to gather as long as they want. But once they watched both sides go back and forth, now they've seen what's worked and what hasn't worked. You can now build a manual off of that. You have all that data, all that information. You can rebuild field manuals off of that. Again, I don't know this is a fact. I know they're gathering it to build new field manuals. That I'm 100% sure of. It's just my gut that says they're done. But I could be wrong. Maybe they want more. I don't know. Okay. But I was in training when I was in my time, man. I think you could do it.
I mean, I feel like how drones, I mean, drone guns and drones,
yep.
A lot of this stuff is, I don't want to say it's in experimental phases, but really is like developing at a speed and at a rate in this country that hasn't been seen in a very long time. And I don't think America is going to lose interest in the development of drone guns or things like that, or that are actively going on in Ukraine anytime soon. But I also think there's a lot more motivations to this than this. But I remembered my point. That I wanted to say, and I just lost it again.
Go ahead, please.
I just lost. Wait, no, I got it again. Okay, so
okay, go ahead.
When it comes to whether or not the Ukrainians could win the way they want to win, I think it's largely going to be dependent upon, and we have been touching on this at the start, the whole conversation, on how much their allies are going to be willing to go with them, how long, and how 100%. And how firm in their support they're going to be. That's why I want more statements like what the German finance minister said, like yearly we have 5 billion for Ukraine allocated every year. That's our plan. That's their base allotment, depending like if things don't change. I would like to see more statements like that from different European countries, because it isn't just an American effort. I think it needs to be an effort of many allied countries. We can't win this alone. And plus, there's a continent that separates us. It's Europe's backyard. It is most certainly their responsibility. They're more directly affected by the outcome of this war
100%.
Than we are at the end of the day. I do think some people undercut how much support certain European states have given. We're actually, I think, 8th for the most aid given by percentage of GDP. The countries that are ahead of us are Estonia. I think the highest is Estonia, or one of the Baltic states at 1.3%. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. I think the Czech Republic was ahead of us. We were like 7th. So, but I do believe they need to be investing more. But I think it is largely dependent upon how long we're willing to go with the Ukrainians. And that's why I think we need to really entrench in, and I think inform the American public for the fact that this could be a longer war. Once a war lasts more than 4, 5, 6 months, they tend to last quite a while, and they're very hard to get off. Definitely when the positions entrench into two different positions, and the Ukrainian and the Russian positions are entrenched. That's why I think negotiation right now, while I'm not completely opposed to the idea, and if there was an offer that there was a legitimate chance of succeeding, yes, I think you could go for it, you could try it. But I don't think it has a chance of succeeding at any time in the near future, because their positions are just so different and irreconcilable that until I think the power balance changes significantly, that one side is going to have to make more concessions.
If you're right, if that's true, then we basically have the Korean Peninsula all over again. Literally a ceasefire by default.
A ceasefire, but I don't think it's a ceasefire by default.
Well, what'll happen is if neither side can break through because they're so entrenched, offensives will be limited, if minor, if ever, small offensives here or there. Eventually, it's basically a waste of time. Your troops will lose morale. Your generals won't want to attack anymore, and they'll start telling the bosses, "What are we doing? Let's stop this thing. Let's just keep it the way it is." And they will keep a ceasefire, but no official peace treaty. Same as in Vietnam. In Korea. Korea right now.
It could get to that point. I don't think that's a point we've reached right now, considering in the last year we've seen, significant amounts of territory liberated, and we've seen, I would say it'd have to be a frozen front line a little bit. I think a decent chunk longer, and with no movements on the front for that to be the case. Not to mention, there's still more like capabilities that could be made available to the Ukrainians, like ATACMS shipments. The F-16 fighter jets we're not going to see this year, but we're probably going to see earliest late next year. And so challenging Russian air power could possibly change the dynamic, but that's going to be a very long-term investment. Either way, I don't think we've reached that point yet. Well, if we do reach that point, eventually, yes, you have to pull the plug on at least the immediate hostilities. But if we haven't yeah, sorry, you wanted to wrap up?
I'm going to give you a bold prediction.
Oh, a bold prediction. Gotcha.
Give you a bold prediction. 12 months from now, or 11, because we did 11 months last time. We'll talk 11 months from now. There will be a peace treaty, either already signed or in process. And Russia will still have at least 3 out of 4 of those provinces.
3 out of 4?
That's my prediction.
That's your prediction.
At least 3 out of 4, if not all 4. If not all 4. 3 out of 4, if not all 4. But I'm going to go with 3 out of 4. Russia will have 3 out of 4 of those provinces. There'll be a peace treaty either already signed or literally in process. It'll be obvious it's in process within 11 months from now. And and Putin will be able to say he won.
Is this like
able to say?
Is this like this is what you like? Is this like a shits and giggles? Like I'm just kind of guessing, or is this more?
No, I think that's going to be the truth.
Okay, what? You're basing it off of what exactly?
I don't see either side breaking through, and now there would be an exception, but I am keeping my prediction, but I will give an exception, but I'm still keeping my prediction. If the U.S. actually brings in the A1A1s, the Abrams tanks and the F-16s, and it's an actual offensive with those 2 weapon systems, if there's an offensive, they're not defensive units, there's an offensive with those weapons. I think if that happens, we have to push on. The military-industrial complex has to make sure those units are effective and work well.
I mean, we've already sent 31 Abrams tanks. Well, they haven't. I don't think they're in service yet.
I said offensive. I said sent it in an offensive. There was an offensive with M1 Abrams tanks and F-16s. If they send them into the field in an offense, they say, we're going to attack this city or this area, whatever, I might change my mind. Because in that case, we have to have a win. I don't see it happening. I think the tanks get there and never go into the offense. I think they go there and they start peace treaties.
I mean,
peace talks.
We've seen Western tanks on the offense, though, like the Leopards.
We haven't seen M1A1 Abrams.
Well, yeah, because
I told you.
Yeah, because they're not in service yet.
And we're not gonna. That's my point. We're not going to. I don't think we are. I can't see America losing those tanks.
Look, I'm not gonna make. I've learned from this war not to make very bold this is how the war will go predictions. Definitely after the Wagner coup. I don't think anybody expected that expansion pack, that DLC. I don't think anybody expected that. What I will say, though, is I will 100% take you up on the bet that we're not going to see Abrams in an offensive capacity. I don't agree with you. I think if the Ukrainians, I think, are determined to liberate their country. So if they get their hands on those tanks and they think that that could at all change the balance, I think there's a very good chance that they throw it into an offensive. I mean, that's what they did with the Leopards. That's what they did with the other Western tanks. And
yes.
and I also want to emphasize that when it comes to Bradleys and stuff like that, because people, somebody confirmed to me, by the way, it's 20 destroyed Bradleys. It was 20 destroyed Bradleys.
It was a couple dozen.
Yeah,
right.
20 destroyed, and I think 23 that were damaged and or fixed, something like that.
Yep.
Those things, though, keep the Ukrainian soldiers a lot safer than those old Soviet transports.
100%. They're much better. The BMPs are a disaster compared to the Bradleys. But I'm saying we've lost Bradleys, but we don't mind losing Bradleys because the U.S. military doesn't use Bradleys anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're already past Bradleys. That's old stuff, right? So we don't mind giving the Bradleys up because we don't use them anymore.
That's the thing that also that kind of really angers me about when we see it, because I'll see these like numbers on aid to Ukraine, and the numbers will be wild. Sometimes I remember RFK said on Joe Rogan's podcast, we've spent $1.8 trillion on the war in Ukraine. $1.8 trillion. Is
that right?
Yeah, that's what he said. RFK has said a lot of interesting things, right? This isn't the first interesting thing he said. He also said that for every Russian soldier that die, 7 Ukrainian soldiers die. It's just a made-up statistic.
Is that true?
No, it's not true.
I have never heard that before. Wow.
Tucker Carlson also said that. I can tell you what I can.
Maybe it's true.
If you're well, it isn't. I can tell you what it's based off. I know what it's based off.
It's not true.
It's not true.
Okay, good.
So
okay,
you remember the Jack. Well, if that was true, then the Ukrainian army would have collapsed much earlier, considering how much.
That's what I'm saying. It seems crazy. Okay.
It comes from the Jack Texera leaks with that National Guardsman who leaked all that stuff on Discord. And I don't know. Was that this year or was that last year? This was this year, right? This was this year. Earlier this year. In those leaks, somebody went and edited them and made what the original data actually said in the documents was for every Ukrainian soldiers die, 2.5 Russians die, which is what you would expect with Russia primarily being the attacker and considering some of the tactics they've used. But they went and somebody edited it to make it look like the Ukrainians were actually taking much higher casualties and then spread it around. And it must have somehow ended up on either RFK's and Tucker Carlson's social media feed, and then they just repeated it. I don't know if they did it cynically or if they didn't check if it was correct or not. But what really surprised me is Fox just let that air with like no correction and it was said twice on the Fox network. It really
that's my point I was bringing up earlier, right? You're talking about details that the average American is never going to know, right? We're not looking at this war that way. We're not doing deep dives. You know, I know more about it because I pay attention to some of the military people who I know, and I pay attention to you. So I pay attention. So I'm hearing things from people who I pay attention to because I actually give a shit. But most people aren't paying attention to this at all. If I ask the average person, they just go, yeah, Ukraine. If I ask them why, they go, 'cause Putin bad. And that's all they know about the entire war. They couldn't tell you why it happened, what happened, nothing. They just know. I live in New York City, so most people are more left-leaning. More left-leaning people support Ukraine than right-leaning, as a general rule. And so most people I know support the war against Russia in Ukraine. I get it. But they couldn't tell you how or why or what. They have literally no idea, no clue. So my worry is once this gets too dirty or nasty, or worse, I think something else is going to happen. And I see this already happening. People start saying,
when you say
a minute,
I gotta get a clarification. When you say too dirty or too nasty, this war is already pretty dirty and
not
pretty
for an
nasty.
American. It isn't. Not for America. It's not. No, not for Americans.
Well, for Americans,
for us,
Americans, war is like an abstract thing. You can kind of like turn off and on, and like, you know, you can.
Absolutely, yeah. Not for us. It isn't. For us, we're just watching back. But here's what's going to happen. Someone's going to, and it's already happening. They're saying, "What about our student debt loan? Our student loan debt? How about that? How come you're not paying for that?" That's what's starting to happen.
This angers me. This angers me a lot, though. That stuff really pisses me off a lot.
I know, but hear me out. When they say that, they don't understand what's happening over there. All they know is money go there. I want money here. That's as far as they see. And that is also my worry that now they go, well, now I don't like Ukrainians anymore. Why? Because I want my thing, whatever my thing is, right? I pick my pet project that I want. I decide my pet project's more important than the other. Well, then no more Ukraine. That's my other worry. And I think when politicians get a hold of that, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I want to give you whatever. If you're on the right, you want to build the wall. Okay, you want to build the wall. I can't go to Ukraine. I got to build the wall. Or on the left, they go, I want to, do my student loan debt.
It is about
that is
time.
my worry.
It is about time that Flint, Michigan finally got cluster munitions.
There we go. Yes.
But
you know what?
The thing that angers
that would actually make it better. That place might be better after that. I'm not even sure.
The thing that really angers me about this is that, first off, the numbers are almost always wrong that people are throwing out about how much military aid we've gone out. You'll hear numbers like 200, 300, 400 billion. They're like crazy numbers. The number we've sent is about 40 to 45 billion, right? And of that 40 to 45 billion, a lot of people just think we're like sending over like buckets of cash, and that's why everybody has this like money laundering scheme and like idea in their mind. That isn't the case. We're sending a lot of stuff that's already been pre-built, or we're spending money on contracts with military companies who then build it and then send it to Ukraine. It's not easy to like pawn off a Bradley. It's a lot easier if you were just taking a little bit off the top on like some monetary like stuff, but you can't take the top off a Bradley. That's not a thing you can do. It's also very hard to smuggle one of those things out of a country, right? So that's one angle that's really infuriating to me. Another angle that's infuriating to me is a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the equipment we're sending over, like you acknowledged earlier, is stuff we don't even have anymore. We don't even use anymore. It's stuff that will never, ever, ever be able to be used in another context. This is stuff that would most likely sit in American stock, like some storage unit, and rot over 50 years and then become useless and then never be used. And lastly, I think a lot of people think we've sent much more aid, and this is just true of foreign aid generally, than we actually do. If you poll Americans on how much money they think we're actually spending on foreign aid, some Americans seem to think we spend 10 to 15 to 20% of our money on foreign aid. Like a crazy amount of money. The amount of money we spend on foreign aid is like 1 to 2, maybe like 3%. You'd have to do some like crazy financial mumble.
I don't think it's even 3%. I think that's probably high.
I'm being very generous with the numbers right now.
I think 3% is high.
I think that a lot. I think Ukraine has become a scapegoat for basically every single political issue. You're in debt because of student loans. Oh man, if only people had sent you a HIMARS, then you could have blown up the college unit or something. I don't know.
I see this on my Twitter feed or Facebook posts, and whenever anyone brings up Ukraine. And it's more in the last, say, 2 months. I'm guessing in that area, I haven't really paid that much attention, but in that area of what about Americans? What about Americans? What about Americans, right? And if they're from the right, it's almost always border issue. If they're from the left, it's almost always the homeless problem or a school debt. Almost always. I mean, if you're from the right, it's border. If you're from the left, it's homeless or a school debt.
Think about it, though. I mean, we have a problem with militarized police. Most people think demilitarize the police. Better idea, militarize the homeless. Counterbalance.
There was a guy who actually did that called Arm the Homeless in Michigan. Literally did that.
How did that go?
It did not go well. However, he did get publicity. He did get some publicity about it. I still remember it. So yes, absolutely. So there was a guy who actually took your joke and did it. He did it. Yes.
I don't have much more to ask you. I do wanted to talk to you about one more thing, and it has to do with the Libertarian Party. Membership in the Libertarian Party and dues in the Libertarian Party are down.
True.
It's not looking great right now for membership and dues. I've talked to a bunch of people, mostly from the classical liberal caucus, because I probably agree with them more than, like, say, the Mises caucus.
Sure.
And they give me a lot of reasons as to why this is happening. I'll hear something along the lines of, the Mises caucus has gone to extreme. They're too worried with like the social media, kind of like crazy posts. I don't know if you saw the recent stuff with Nina Turner, but that probably was not the best image the Libertarian Party has had in a while. How much do you think it is that? Because I also think that there's probably, I think there's a little bit more to it, which I'll elaborate on that, but I wanted to get your take first.
Well, are we good with Ukraine?
Yeah, I think we're good with Ukraine, unless there's anything else you wanted to say.
No, I made my bold prediction. We'll see if I'm right or if I'm wrong. But now you have to bring me back in 11 months now. So now you have to.
Yeah, you can come on back in 11 months, and I won't predict. The thing is, I don't think this war has been won, and I don't think this war has been lost. I think it's still up in the air. I think some people are. I've seen so many people like the war victory is inevitable, or Ukraine will inevitably get crushed, like Douglas McGregor. I believe that we are living in the present, and if we do not ring that bell, then yeah, the Ukrainians could lose. Now there's no scenario where Ukraine, in my mind, no longer exists. The Russians are not going to be able to march on Kiev. I mean, here's something I didn't get to mention earlier, but Bakhmut was fought over for 9 to 10 months. The Russians
I remember
to take that.
Yes.
It was a very brutal battle that was not supposed to be that brutal of a battle. It became very symbolically important, and it became a meat grinder. It's a city of 70,000 people. I don't think many people realize how small the city is in comparison to Kiev, a city of 3.5 million. Kupiansk, which is the next city in the Donetsk Oblast, the Russians would want to take after Bakhmut, not Kupiansk, Kramatorsk, that's 150,000 people, right? If it takes them 9 to 10 months to take that, it's hard for me to imagine that they're going to be taking Kiev or that uniting Donetsk is happening in the immediate future. So I do want to throw that out there, but sorry, I interrupted you. I'm dozing off.
No. No worries.
Please.
I will.
Mises Caucus.
I will give you my view on the Libertarian Party. It is still, as always, the only chance to get 50 state ballot access for presidential candidate in 2024. It is still the largest third party in America. Still, it is still the only chance to make any impact in the third party. Cornel West is doing well, but the Green Party doesn't have the infrastructure to do what it's supposed to do to support him well enough for him to make the impact that he would like to make. It is still the best chance of making impact. One of the reasons that people are upset is because the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is very aggressive in their social media. They're right. 100% true. They do things that are completely bad and terrible. 100%, yes. But I don't bring it up every goddamn 5 minutes. It's the classical liberal caucus who keeps reposting everything. They bring it up more than anybody else. I ignore it. And when they do it, it motivates them. Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is a bunch of trolls. They want you to do that. They wanted Nina Turner to respond. And Nina Turner loved it. She got a bunch of stuff too. They all won. They got exactly what they wanted. Nina Turner got a bunch of people on hers. They got a bunch on theirs. And the Classic Liberal Caucus jumped on board and played with the trolls. Leave the trolls alone. It's one group of people out of New Hampshire. Leave them alone.
Didn't the Libertarian
bigger fish to fry?
Didn't the National Party back up New Hampshire in their post about Nina Turner shortly afterwards?
What do you mean by back up?
They reposted it and then argued with Nina Turner about it, saying that
they did argue. Yes, they argued with Nina Turner. They did. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And they shouldn't have either. Leave them alone. It's what I keep saying. We have bigger fish to fry. We're fighting over shit that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And you might get mad. Well, wait a minute. They told a black woman to do some bad stuff. People say racist shit on the internet every day, all the time. Does any of that make our country better? Does it make Ukraine better? Does it make your life better, my life better? No. Ignore it and move on. There are bigger fish to fry. That's what I keep saying, and people keep wanting to fight it, and it just makes things worse. Work on your area. Work on what you can. Make life better. Let the trolls, haters gonna hate. Move on. It drives me goddamn crazy. And but here's why. They're right. Why are they right? I hate that they're right. I feel like when Andrew Tate says something that's based on truth, I get angry because I don't want him to be right ever. Mm-hmm. But sometimes he says something real and I go, damn it, he's right. Right? So he's right. New Hampshire's right. We can't, and I told you this last time we talked about this. They will ignore us like there's no tomorrow. They will diss us like there's no tomorrow. They will dismiss us like there's no tomorrow. We say one thing that's racist, and we get all the press we could ever imagine all day long. And the sad part is they actually grow from it. So Libertarian Party of New Hampshire actually grows from this shit. So they're actually right, and I hate it. They shouldn't be doing it. It's a terrible way of growing. There are better ways of growing, but the problem is the establishment continues to ignore us and treat us like garbage and give everybody else all the value, focusing only on the bad. It drives me crazy. I'm sorry, I yapped away, but you got me going.
Yeah, no, it's not. I wanted to hear your opinion. I guess the thing that, I mean, the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire might be growing, right? But the party overall is shrinking. So it might be helpful for them individually, but for the party as a whole, I feel that it's driven a lot of people away. I think a lot of people have an image of the Libertarian Party that it's silly and it's stupid and it's like not like a legitimate.
They've had that for 50 years.
Yeah, but the last thing you want to do is reinforce that idea when that's something you need. That's a conception you need to smash.
So then if any libertarians hadn't be watching this, here's my advice. Stop retweeting their shit with your look, I'm you signal on how much I hate this. Or just don't do anything and leave it alone. You could just do that. The virtue signaling isn't helping. It's hurting. It's making things worse. You are correct. We as libertarians should just shut up and walk away. You don't see me get involved in any of that shit. Never. And they tag me and they try to get me in and I ignore them. Because I don't want my people on my social media seeing that garbage, so I don't repeat it. So I don't talk about it. I don't take a stand on it. Who cares? If I took a stand on that and I got involved and I said Nina Turner was right and Nina Turner was wrong or whatever I said, how would that made anything better? Nothing better at all. Mm-hmm. People who know me know me. Those who don't know me don't. Libertarian Party already has a terrible image already. What's gonna save us in any way is what always will. There'll be hopefully one person who will show up at the media and a group we'll take serious. That was Gary Johnson in 2016. We had our biggest explosion we ever had. We had 4.5 million votes in that election, 3% electorate. It was a great year for us. We need whoever our next Gary Johnson is. I hope it's better than Gary Johnson. I love Gary Johnson, but he was Gary Johnson.
I do want to, because I think that, I mean, I feel like the Mises Caucus is, while Gary Johnson was not a perfect candidate, he was more marketable than a lot of the 100%. People that I feel that the Mises Caucus or the new leadership is pushing. But the thing that's really getting me about this is I don't think it's just, that they're edgy. I also feel like for some of the world's issues, some of the problems that Americans face, that the libertarian solutions are not the ones that many Americans are interested in. I think you're right. I think if somebody was to bring up a great example would be in Gary Johnson, when somebody brought up the topic of Syria, brutal civil war, mm-hmm. ISIS fighters are there, brutal regime, barrel bombing his population, and he's asked about it, and he doesn't know anything, literally anything. He did. What do you think about Aleppo? What is Aleppo?
Absolutely not accurate.
What do you?
Not accurate.
How is that not accurate?
The problem is hold on. The problem is if anyone cares, and I don't think any of your audience cares, but if any of your audience actually cares about this, watch the entire clip. He was put cold. The guy just went, "What about Aleppo?" That's what he said out of nowhere. Garrett was like, "What's Aleppo?" They're like, "Oh, the Syrian city." He then explained his view on it, but you don't see that. All you see is what's Aleppo, and they cut it. If anybody does care, I mean. 7 years ago, probably nobody cares. Mm-hmm. If you do, watch the entire clip. He actually explained it. He actually did have a view on Syria.
What was his position?
He's like most libertarians, anti-war. Try to get a peace treaty. Don't get involved. If you got to fight a war, let them fight a war. Don't get involved. Now, you may disagree with that, but he did have a policy. And to your point, a lot of people don't like libertarian answers. I agree with you. I think a lot of people don't. But it doesn't mean we don't have any. We do have policies. And the most important piece I will say with any third party, I was just on I was on News Nation on DylanBurnsLIVE, and we were talking about Dr. Cornel West. And they were trying to slam him, saying, "Oh, he owes $500,000 in taxes and blah, blah, blah. Don't you care? It's a joke, isn't it, Larry?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't care. He's a third party. He's a good idea. He's trying to change the system. I don't care if he owes $500,000 in tax. I don't give a shit at all. The United States owes $32 trillion, and they're not going to pay it back. Fine. He'll get along perfect with them. I don't care. If he can make a change, if he can help this country, I'm in." Dr. Cornel West and I agree on almost nothing in policy. Very rare will we agree on many things in policy. Very few things. But I care about fixing things and having ideas. If I talk about my idea, someone has to talk about it too. Right now, the left just goes, Republicans bad. The right goes, Democrats bad. And that's it. No one has an answer. No one solves our problems. They don't even have an answer for Ukraine. They don't have an answer for the border. They don't have an answer for school school debt. They don't have an answer for our problems with our homeless. They don't have an answer for anything. Republicans say there's no problem, and Democrats say throw more money at it.
Well, I mean, when we talk, I gotta say, when somebody's for the foreign policy issues, it feels like the libertarian solution has always been like, not our business, not our problem.
That's accurate.
That's a different variation of it. And if we're saying that like they don't have a plan or they don't have a plan to deal with it, the libertarian plan to deal with it is just not to deal with it at all.
No, not always. Depends upon the libertarian, right? And we actually have two people who have, I think, we have four people running for president right now in the Libertarian Party. Lars Mapstead, Chase Oliver, Michael Termott, and Joshua Smith. Those are the four people who are running right now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anyone will jump in. Someone might jump in, someone might not. I think the people that
I'll jump in.
I love it. I love to have you. There are two people that have the best chance, I think, of winning right now at this moment in time. It's Chase Oliver and Lars Mapstead. Chase Oliver is very popular because he was the one who was responsible for the runoff in Georgia.
I remember that. Republicans hated him.
That's correct. So he is, and he's the youngest one running and openly gay, which of course in the Libertarian Party, everyone who's gay is openly gay. Nobody cares. So yes, but that's not what Republicans. They're often closeted gay, but Libertarians, we don't care. You can be openly gay. It's fine. We don't care. And Lars Mapstead is independently financially set. He's a tech guy out of Northern California, so he can finance his own campaign. So Lars has the most cash. Chase is the most popular. I think one of those two will probably be our nominee, is my guess at this moment. And if we do that, then you know what? We have a chance of moving forward, of uniting our party again and moving forward again, and hopefully having another Garrett Johnson moment. If we do that, we'll be okay. That is my hope.
Okay, but what is their position on Ukraine and all these other things outside of, it's not our business, don't do anything?
Almost always, if you're asking libertarians, most of us are going to be like, look, not our fight. Why are we involved? Not our fight.
So that is their position on Ukraine.
Yes. I mean, look, I'm not speaking for them, but I know libertarians. The odds are they're going to be like, not our fight. Why are we involved? Let's sell weapons to both sides. What libertarians do. I know people hate it, but I'm not going to say a lot of you. I'm telling you the truth. Libertarians do not want to be involved in wars at all. If they're not bombing us, we don't want to be involved. Don't want to be involved. We want to be selling everything to everybody and bombing nobody. That's what we want.
Got you.
I probably just made half of your audience yell at me, but I'm just.
Well, no, I mean, of course, we come from two completely different worldviews. I just don't think it's practical. I think that's part of the reason why, like, I like a lot of libertarian ideas. I actually am very sympathetic to, because I'm very.
There's something else to remember. Look, the reality of it is, we know when we run for office, it is very rare that we win. Sometimes libertarians do win local offices. That's happened. Libertarians do win local offices here or there. We've had people in assemblies, state assemblies. We've had people in city councils. We do win local elections sometimes. But anything bigger than that, we know we're probably not going to win. The odds are slim to none. But the reality of it is, we do want to get our mindset into the mainstream. Is America going to become isolationist? No. But could we at least start bringing back the empire a bit? Do we really need 900 bases across the country, across the globe? Do we really need to be dropping that amount of money every single year in the military-industrial complex? No. Even if the country took 10% of what we're talking about to heart, we'd have a better country. We'd have a better country if they took 10%.
I will say that there are definitely... The thing is, and this is true with libertarians and like people like Rand Paul, like I disagree with Rand Paul on so much. I think that, for example, his holdup on our ambassadorships, I think has been a disaster for America's relationship with many countries. In fact, we didn't have an ambassador in Niger when the coup happened, meaning that anything that we could have done to try to de-escalate what could possibly spiral out into a war is just not possible. Why? Because he wants information about Wuhan lab leak.
But he also wants to end qualified immunity, and he wrote the Justice for Breonna
Taylor.
I forgot her last name.
Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, Breonna Taylor. Thank you. He wrote the Justice for Breonna Taylor.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but my point was,
we do good.
if he wants to help and support for the Saudi war in Yemen, which seems to be somewhat de-escalating, hopefully he continues to, then I'm going to work with him on that. If he wants to end into Ukraine or try to stop us from having a diplomatic relationship, then I'm going to fight him on that. Anything I can work with him on, I'm going to work with him on.
But that's the point. If you have a third party, obviously I prefer libertarians, but I would even take the Greens, right? I've worked with Howie Hawkins before. I would take the Greens, but a third party is what gets people to talk, because Democrats, Republicans, they can't work together anymore. They always fight. When it's a third party, they can work together. And look, work together on us when it comes to ending the drug war. Work together with us on that. We're happy, and then we'll fight on school choice or something, whatever. I don't care, but we'll support each other on on the war on drugs. We could do that. Supporting small farmers. Libertarians want to support small farmers. We can do that kind of stuff. Larry, we are valuable in the discourse, even when we don't win.
Larry, I'm gonna throw you a real libertarian hardball. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Have you ever dropped acid?
I have not.
You have not. Was it just like something you were never interested in, or were you never in that crowd?
Never interested in it. I'm not against it. I think psychedelics is a wonderful idea. People should do whatever they want. And again, a personal note, I have known many veterans who it's helped them through guided trips, have helped them through PTSD tremendously. It has helped them to separate the actual issues they've dealt with and having good conversations on the issues that have given them PTSD. It has helped them tremendously. So I'm a big fan of it. 100% fan of it.
We're just on I think we're tip of the spear when it comes to the type of healing that can be done with psychedelics and the lack and the research that was purposely stunted by the federal government. It's not like anyone was overdosing on acid. It was just all rumors and conjecture about people like taking acid and staring into the eyes to the sun for hours, and then they become blind. And it almost sounds like if you keep touching it, you're gonna go blind. You know, it's right. It sounds right. of the same vein.
Why is this a hardball? Libertarians, we have a it's Libertarian Party.
Well, no, I was
all about
I was
pushing it.
I was interested to see if because acid and psychedelics are viewed in a very weird way societally, where I feel like it should be viewed, I don't want to say it's not the same as marijuana, but when it's viewed on the effects it can have in your body, it should not be viewed too differently than how we view marijuana as a recreational enjoyment drug. Not the only purpose of it, but that view of it doesn't exist, and there's still like a lot of stigma around it, where when someone hears acid, it's scheduled at the same level as like heroin, and there's still a gigantic stigma around it.
And shouldn't be at all. Look, when it comes to social issues, libertarians are more liberal than liberals. We are as far as we can possibly go. Of course we are. Right? This is the thing I bring up all the time. They did in 2018 when I ran for governor, there were 5 different campaigns running: Green Party, me, Serve America Movement, Democrats, Republicans. And the press went in and did a check on who had the most diverse team of all teams. I had the most diverse team. I was the only person who even had a trans person on their team. My policy chief was a trans woman. So I was the only one who had people of every background, everything on the team. And why? Because I'm a libertarian. I don't care. Come on board. Can you do the job? Let's go. Let's do this. I wasn't trying to check boxes, and people come to us. So when it comes to social stuff, we're good. There's no hardball for us.
Oh, there's one last thing I want to wrap this up. It's about Ukraine. I just remembered it, and I forgot to ask you about it earlier. You said that if we were to make an offer to the Russians at those early days, and the international community, if the Russians went forward with an invasion anyway, would then unite against them like more
I think we
concretely.
Would.
I don't know how much more concretely we could have expected the world to unite and show opposition to the war than what they did with the UN votes and what we're seeing currently. Are you saying like more weapon shipments from Africa? Like what would have been different that would have seen
what I think would have happened? This is what I believe. 2 things. One, when I said we unite, I should have been clearer. I meant Americans. I should have been clearer. I meant Americans would have united more, because we don't like people breaking treaties and breaking deals. Americans don't like that.
Well, we do it all the time.
Yeah, but that's us. We can.
Okay.
Right? It's a total double standard. It is a total double standard. You are correct, and it's still true. It's a total double standard. We can break any deal we want. Nobody else can. They're all evil, and they're all bad. So I think America would have done that. But something else, assuming that we were serious about making a peace treaty, and again, I'm saying if it were me, right, so I can only speak for myself, I would have taken those 2 years to dig in even more, to make it even a tougher nut to crack, if that makes any sense. Make it to where the Russians didn't want to go in, right? That they would have thought, I can't go in. Like, I think the Russians in general did not think it was going to be anywhere near as hard as it was.
No.
I don't think they thought it was going to be anywhere near as hard. I would have wanted them to believe it was going to be this hard, so they wouldn't have done it. That's what I think would have happened.
There's two things I would say. The first thing I would say is that we already kind of gave the Russians a lot of outs on this, I would say. I would say up till 2022, we were generally pretty lenient in comparison. If you compare the amount of aid we sent to Ukraine beforehand and after, I mean, we only actually sent our first offensive military aid, I think, in 2019. And that was almost stopped by Trump as he tried to leverage it against Zelensky for information on Biden.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at like the old Obama statements after the 2014 invasion, annexation of Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, I remember I read a statement and it blew me away. It was, if Russia continues to invade and takes over all of Ukraine, it would make our relationship with Russia very problematic and not productive. And
did Obama actually say that?
Yes.
Wow.
That's 2015. And he didn't say like, oh, we're going to send military aid. We're going to send this. We're going to send that. We left them basically high and dry.
So he told Putin that he could invade.
He didn't tell them that he can invade. They did employ sanctions. But afterwards,
Biden kind of said that too. Biden kind of said he could invade.
He didn't say he could invade because he specifically said, if you do it, we're not going to like it. But he didn't say we're going to go in there and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. He applied sanctions, and that was basically it. And then afterwards, let me finish. This last part is very important. And then it was clarified that Ukraine's not going to be joining NATO anytime soon because any nation state that has a territorial dispute around its land can't join NATO. And so not only did we basically go like, we then also basically confirmed to the Russians that for the immediate future, Ukraine isn't joining NATO. We can.
But I feel like you've just done. You've just said that I was right in what I said.
What I said was, yes, this is what I wanted to bring this up to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to bring it up to you because I feel like what you're describing is something we while we didn't do it in all of its ways, like, okay, here's the final deal that we're going to do. We did kind of basically let the Russians get away with it for a very long time, for basically 8 years.
And I'm saying the opposite. No. What I'm saying is I said earlier that I had no evidence, but I felt like we probably encouraged it, but I said we let them do it. And that's my point. Yes, we let them. We didn't say do it or we'll stop you. What I'm saying is if we should have tried to make a deal that said, here's the deal. And if you cross this red line, well, we're not going to stand for it. You're going to start getting bombed by American bombers, right? Because we're making a deal. And we didn't make a deal. The same thing we did with Saddam Hussein going into Kuwait. Same thing. We didn't say you can't go into Kuwait or we'll attack. We went, whatever, so what are you going to do? Things happen. Is Kuwait your next, whatever. Then he invades. Then we're fighting him. Same thing we did with Russia and Ukraine. We should have been very clear. Let's make a deal. You're not going to attack. We're going to do X. You're going to do Y. No attack. Done. We didn't do it. If we'd have done that now 2 years later, they decided to attack. Well, it's clear.
Well, I feel like my main problem with the Obama position is I feel like he didn't establish any red lines. His position was way too lenient on the Russians. Trump's position was too lenient on the Russians. And Biden's, for the first year of his presidency, was too lenient on the Russians. It wasn't until I feel the 2022 invasion when a wake-up call happened and people realized, like, wow, maybe that whole 8 years was just the Russians delaying and kicking the can down the road.
This is my point about us letting him do it. I'm being very clear.
But then wouldn't the counter be? Wouldn't the counter be? So we need to draw a red line in the sand and push them out?
Yes. No, not push them out. Make a deal saying you're not going to attack. Now, we could have made a deal to where we had some type of, we've done it before, where there's some type of autonomous region or blah, 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 whatever.
We did. By the way, we did make things. We had the Minsk Accords. We had negotiations where the Russians even said they would pull out their troops. And none of that ever happened.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm also saying I feel that if I could have done it, and maybe I couldn't have, right? There's no way I can know if Putin was 100% going to do it. I don't know. Maybe he was going to anyway. But if there was a way for me, if I was in charge, to make a deal, even if I delayed it 2 years, I would have done it. If I could have delayed this even 2 years, if they make a deal in 2022, he doesn't invade till 2024. I would take it. That's 2 years to defend, 2 years to make it a hard nut to crack, and a red line that I can say, well, no. We made a deal 2 years ago. You can't do this. No, you can't. And now I can even go, which is more important. At this point, I can go to the Congress and go, I want an authorization of use of force.
Well, I don't think there was.
He broke the treaty.
I don't think there was any. I don't think that. Well, they already did break a treaty. It was a memorandum. We had the Budapest memorandum. That's something. By the way,
didn't.
What? Let me ask you about this, because I feel like everything you're describing to me is the closest we ever had to something like that was the Budapest memorandum, where both the United States and Russia agreed that they would respect Ukraine's territorial integrity, and if its territory is infringed upon, we would come to its aid. Is that not what we're fulfilling right now?
No,
we're not coming to its aid.
No. Well, okay. That's not what I was saying. Let me be clear. Yes, you're correct. Look, I'm not saying you're how to explain this.
Well, I feel like that fulfills what you're asking for pretty concretely.
It doesn't, because I want an actual treaty with a clear red line, with a clear understanding that I can go to Congress and ask for an authorization of use of force or declaration of war, either one of them. I can go there and ask for it, and the Russians know I can go ask for it.
So NATO membership.
That's what I want. I want them to know that I'm prepared to go ask for use of force. If they come across that border?
Isn't that NATO membership? NATO membership is the one thing we know. Like, you attack a NATO nation, you're gonna. I mean, it's worked, hasn't it? Like, NATO nations aren't getting invaded. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all countries probably traditionally weaker than Ukraine. Russia would claim them off the same historical claims they made on Ukraine. They aren't getting invaded.
Look, I'm not a big fan of NATO.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a big fan of NATO. I think NATO is just making things worse in general. We have a UN, use the UN. I'm not a big fan of NATO. But if we're going to be in NATO, I'm
sorry, I got to ask you that. What do you mean by use the UN?
If you have to do, what do we call it? Authorizations of force or whatever we do, use the UN if you want to use
the UN isn't a defensive alliance. If one UN state is invaded, that doesn't compel me to go defend that UN state. These two things serve totally different purposes.
You're asking, you're asking my perfect world versus reality.
Gotcha.
In my perfect world,
also,
we're not part of NATO.
We should wrap this up soon because I'm keeping you too long.
Yeah, but we shouldn't be part of NATO in my perfect world, but we are. We've already made the agreements. We're there. I get that. I'm not living in a fantasy world. Mm-hmm. But if I had my druthers, we wouldn't be part of NATO either. Let the Europeans fight their wars. I am a libertarian. I agree. Let them fight their wars. But that's not where we are. We are literally engaged in all these things. So we have to do what's best for the situation that we're in which case I don't want Ukrainians fighting a war. If I could help broker a peace, I would. If I could do something, I would do so, because that's where we are. But in my perfect world, I wouldn't be involved in any of this stuff. I would let Europeans fight their own wars. I would follow George Washington's ideas, and I wouldn't be in any peace treaties, no treaties at all, if I could do that. But that's not where we are. We're nowhere near that. That's an alternate universe. We're going to watch some Marvel movie on that. That's not where we are. We are deeply involved in the entire world. We are deeply involved in trade and the trade routes and everything. We are involved in everything. So we have to do the best we can with what we have. And I'd like to have as little war as possible. That's what I'd like, as little war as possible.
Got you. One last question I wanted to ask you. Would you be in favor of, and I am interested in this, of air defense specifically continuing to be sent to Ukraine, considering that it would most likely, in most circumstances, be used to protect Ukrainian civilian cities from terror campaigns, bombing campaigns?
You're asking my opinion on this?
Yes, I'm asking your opinion on it. I'm trying to find compromise with you.
I would be prepared to send literally anything, tanks, planes, anything that would get this to a peace. I don't want this to keep doing what it's doing, which I believe is going to be a horrible grinding stalemate. If what we're doing is creating a stalemate, I don't want to do it. If what we're doing is, I'm sorry, not stalemate. If what we're doing is creating a meat grinder, if it's creating a meat grinder, I don't want to do it. If it's going to get us to peace, I'm in. That if you think, if you were my advisor and I was president and you'd say, Mr. President, we do this. We're gonna get the Russians to the peace talks. They're gonna come to the table. I'd say send it. If you go, no, this will just defend it so that we can fight for 3 more years. I'd be like, no, I don't fight for 3 more years. What do I have to send? What do I got to put in front of the Russians to have them actually decide to talk? That's what I want to send. To include, I don't know, as many tanks as you want, whatever. What does it take to get the Russians to stop fighting and to want to have a talk, and the Ukrainians want to have a talk and stop this battle? That's what I would send now, because we're in this. We're in this.
Nuclear armed Ukraine.
My worry is.
Kidding.
Say it again.
Nuclear armed Ukraine. I agree.
I mean, I'll be forward. If I thought that was the answer, I'd open talks. I'm not even joking.
Mm-hmm.
If I honestly thought, if that was real, and I don't know if it's real, I'm making that up. Mm-hmm. If I honestly thought that we would consider stationing nuclear weapons in Ukraine, that would stop the talks, I would. Of course. I want the death to stop. I'd like Ukraine to rebuild itself. I'd like the people to stop dying. If that was a real thing, again, I'm making that up theoretically, I would. That's not off the table for me. That is not off the table. I would consider that too. Yes.
Thank you so much for coming on to today's stream. We went for over 2 hours. I knew it was going to be a long one because
That's your fault. I'm kidding.
Of course it's my fault, but I take full responsibility. I want you to give you an opportunity to shout yourself out, tell people where they could find you, and any charities, causes, anything you wanted to direct people to, anything.
It is Larry Sharpe on all the things. I'm Larry Sharpe on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all the things. I do shows all the time. I put out tons of media. Most of it's live. If you want to see any of my stuff, please feel free. I was just on a couple TV shows last week. I was just on the Vanguard show this afternoon. I did my own show last night at 9 p.m. Eastern. So please check out all I'm doing. If you care about third parties and ballot access in New York State, go to LarrySharpe.com and donate. I'm trying to get ballot access for an individual third party in New York State next year. It's going to cost a lot of money and time, but I'm on board. If you want to jump on board, I could use your help. Let's get a third party and stop this horrible left-right paradigm that solves nothing and just makes things worse.
Thank you so much. You could also go to dnc.com and donate to the Real People's, Workers' Party of the real revolutionaries of the people, like Hillary Clinton and other true revolutionaries. You would describe Hillary Clinton as revolutionary, wouldn't you?
Boo.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Booed. Boo.
I appreciate it. Did you see her face though on MSNBC recently after the Trump indictment? Did you see that shit-eating grin she had?
Yes, absolutely. She's still feeling that way.
I just was waiting for her to just scream, "Lock him up! Lock him up!" I was waiting for it. She didn't do it though. She held it in. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on. You have a good one, okay?
Hi, my friend. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.